I'd like to call the meeting to order. Pledge of allegiance, please. Flag is in the back. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Thank you.
What's going on there?
Roll call, please.
Mr. Seidel.
Here.
Mrs. Knoll. Here. Mrs. Hunt. Here. Mrs. Peck.
Here.
Mrs. Fink. Here. Mr. Bortz. Mr. Umland.
Here.
Mrs. Carroll.
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here. Was the agenda posted?
So nice we did it twice.
Opportunity for citizens to address the board. Seeing none, move on to student rep and their reports.
Barb isn't here. There's a third chair right there.
Hi everyone, I'm Grace. I'm the senior school board rep from Student Council.
I'm Stina. I'm the junior school board rep from Student Council. So this is actually the first 2-day week we've had this year. Kind of interesting with our snow day yesterday. And then unless you're a junior, we had the ACT today, which I think overall went pretty well. We did a lot of prep for it in TB20, so I think students were pretty prepared for it.
And then we're at the last week in the third quarter, so after that, grades will be sealed. And that means we have about 5 weeks until AP testing starts, and then 59 days until graduation.
Prom is on April 13th, and it'll be hosted at the Campanile Center downtown in Minocqua. And it is hosted by the junior class officers.
We also have Student Council State coming up, and that's like April 7th and 8th. And currently for Region 2, we have all three regional officers. So we have the president, the secretary, and the vice president. And so we're hoping to continue that at the state conference next week. And it's a really great opportunity to get ideas about how to make homecoming better and winter ball better and really increase school spirit.
13 students in Mall UN went to a conference at UW-Madison last week, so that was a pretty good turnout for having it back this year.
And then NHS ran a blood drive right before spring break, and they were able to save a bunch of lives with the blood donated. And then for the American Heart Association, they also had a red-out basketball game the end of February that was really successful, and they were able to raise a lot of money for that organization.
And then last week we hosted a solo ensemble convention here, and we had a lot of musicians make it to state this year, so that was good news.
And then this has been the first 2 weeks of spring sports, and they're off to a great start. And some can even start practicing outside, which is really great. That's all we have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, presentation of winter season student recognition.
Hello.
Hello.
So I have 3 groups that we'll be recognizing today. First up for girls basketball, if you want to come forward and introduce yourself for me, please.
Hi, I'm Christina Omet.
So Christina received the GNC Player of the Year for the 2nd year in a row. She was also selected for the WBCA Division II All-State team, which is a really big deal. The girls program as a whole had a cumulative GPA of 3.88 and received 2nd place for the WBCA Academic All-State. So if we can give them a round of applause. Next up, Nordic Ski. If you could come forward and introduce yourselves, please. Great turnout. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Leo Roeder.
I'm Miranda Schneider. I'm Avery McKinney.
Nora DeVries. Elsa Shockley.
Parker McKinney.
Barrett Dagan.
Yarl Mishishal.
And I'm Coach Eric Kern.
The LUHS Nordic Ski team competed at the Wisconsin Nordic Ski League Distance Championships in Cable, Wisconsin on March 2nd and 3rd. Stella Meza made the podium for the classic skate, pursuit races, and overall 7th place for the combined championship. 3 LUHS skiers qualified for junior nationals amongst this group in Lake Placid, New York. Leo, Stella, and Miranda secured positions on the regional team to represent the Great Lakes Division. So if we could give them a round of applause.
Thank you for all your support with the team, and look forward to more support in the future. Really great to see the board and the school supporting non-WIA sport. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Great job.
And then next up, we have DECA. So if any of those students are here, please come forward. Okay, as you met before, Grace is here. Along with her, Abby, Grace, and Addie competed in the state DECA competition in February. An extra congratulations to Grace, who earned a medal in each event and placed second in sports entertainment marketing and qualified for the competition at the DECA International Career Development Conference. So if we can give Grace a round. Thank
you. Next, we need to move up an item, so we're going to do the continuous growth plan quarterly.
Okay, that's us. Okay. Okay. All right, so this is our second year with a continuous growth plan. Our leadership team has been meeting quarterly to evaluate the data that we've collected around our action steps and goals, to think about our plan and if there are any adjustments we need to make moving forward. In February, we met for our mid-year review, and it kind of took on a little bit different spin. It was around the same time that DPI was here visiting, and while we did look at data and the data was shared with you in the board packet, our focus tonight is going to be a little bit more about the conversations we had related to the state report card and trying to really think about what does the report card mean? Like, why are we sitting where we are? What can we do beyond what we've already started in our continuous growth plan to get a shift in student achievement and student outcomes?
So we made no secret about it, right? At the beginning of the year when this process came out, this information came out for us, the report card breakdown. I don't know how many of you have looked at or seen exactly what that looks like. This is a snapshot of the main initial page of our school report card. It gives you measurement in 4 areas. The 4 areas, achievement, growth, target group outcomes, and on track to graduation. As a group, when we looked at these pieces and tried to break this down, this doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot until you dive into the details of the data. I worked extensively with Ryan McKean at CISA to help support us through some of the analysis of this, but we focused really hard on the areas of growth and target group outcomes. In the conversations with Ryan, he had said that the biggest areas of movement in your school report card are going to come when you move in the growth area, because growth actually impacts all of the other areas. If you grow your students, their achievement will go up. If you grow your students, your target group outcomes will go up. If you grow your students, you'll have more students on track to graduation. So growth was the main area of focus in that regard. In that breakdown though, our growth scores out of 100, in ELA we scored it at 20, and 20.4, and in math a 52.7. This places us at different ranges within the state, which is you measure on the side here. The state average falls at 66 in math and 66 in ELA, so where we fall below that state average. We also, in our target group outcomes, it really breaks us down into how we support our Native American students and how we support our students with disabilities. And so that was the area where we needed to really have some focus. So in that regard, I asked Ryan a question. I'm like, okay, so the schools that are doing really well growth-wise in the state, do we know who those schools are? Can you break that down? Can you analyze that for me and put that into a grid? So what he did is he pulled what were the top 25, I think is what this list is, schools in terms of their growth scores, overall growth scores, and where they stacked up. So you select the top of the list, Whitefish Bay School District, but really it's Whitefish Bay High School scored at 100 in growth overall, and 100 in ELA, and 100 in math. So by that calculation, if you're looking at growth, Whitefish Bay is the place to be for your student to grow at the greatest percentage. But in the breakdown of that, what we wanted to do is go through and we wanted to look at these schools and say, what are the things about these schools that they're doing? What are some of the characteristics? What are some of the programming pieces, the things that they're going through and doing that are achieving at such a high level? Because it's not random. It's not randomly happening that way. There are things that they're doing that can make their school have great outcomes in that growth area. So we also, in that process though, combined together with some of the conversations that we had been having both as a staff, as a leadership team, and also in our student leadership groups with some of the things that are going on as areas of concern for us above and beyond the report card. And we're trying to put these pieces together with our overall factor of like, what can our focus be as a school to focus on the greatest amount of movement forward for Lakeland? One of the things we talked about, student and staff safety. We had a staff meeting. Ty and Hope are going to present a little bit on this right after we go through this, that we expressed some great concern that we had. Attendance has been a continual piece that we want to focus on at Lakeland. How do we improve tardies? How do we get kids in our classes when we need them in our classes, and to be focused on that? And then generally there's a sense of some overwhelmed feelings that we had gotten anecdotally through conversations with students, but also from our staff, is like, we are moving at such a rampant pace in how we're doing things. The world of education continues to speed up, but it's hard for us to keep up with that pace. So with all that, then it led to our leadership team having discussions in that regard.
So our thought was like, okay, what can we do? What can we do to impact our student outcomes? Like, as a leadership team, how can we switch these things? So we went to these questions that we talked about. We had, all right, more instructional impact on learning. How can we change that? How can we build about what we are already doing? So this one ties around like the relationships in TB20, since we've already seen that that's making some really good headway. What can we do to build upon that? How can we improve
Are you okay?
I think somebody just jumped in.
Yeah, I think somebody did.
Barb.
Do you want me to see those?
That's fine.
Oh, we're okay.
Okay. So student attendance, how can we improve that? Levi kind of touched on this a little bit, that the teachers saying we're going so fast. The students are saying we're going so fast. So how can we think about like the well-being of everyone? So what kind of slower pace can we go to? What will impact student behavior? So always trying to improve those things. And then how can we be strategic and flexible with class sizes? We have many teachers that keep telling us class sizes, that's what makes a difference. So we were taking all this into consideration, which led us to.
Yeah, and so I can help segue into that for Becky. So this was like the target of our conversation, but we also revisited prior work that we had done. As our leadership team, myself, Becky, and Bill Richter, and Tony Borden all were a part of a team that had really researched what we do as a school academically and how we deliver instruction. We started that 2 years ago, and we had worked through that process that led us to some tweaks in our schedule previously, but it also had some great points of information and some topics that we had gone through.
So that scheduling committee definitely overlapped with the conversation that we were having with the leadership team. And I will say, being part of that scheduling committee a couple years ago, at that time we talked about a change in our daily schedule and what could we do. And at that time the conversation was more towards possibly an alternate block with 90 minutes. And at that time the committee walked away and just said, that doesn't feel right for us as Lakeland staff nor as Lakeland students. But what we did walk away from that scheduling committee was the outcome of TB20. So certainly that was a valuable use of our time and a valuable piece of where we now are with TB20. So as a leadership team, when we were talking about these particular concerns, again, it brought us back around to schedule. What does our schedule look like? And as a leadership team, we unanimously came to the decision as a whole group that next year moving forward, we would change from an 8-period day, including with TB20 on 2 semesters, to we will move to a 5-period day still including TB20 and working under trimesters. So we did present that to the staff at our staff meeting last week, Wednesday. And kind of some of the reasons why we came to that, and we felt it was the right place and the right time now, is that it gives us more instructional time with our students at a deeper level. Yes, go for it.
And don't go away, but
No.
but I just, like, for me, on the curriculum side, we've been doing, like, like, we're starting from the beginning. Like, we had to just, like, reevaluate where we were. And so we dug into standards and made sure that we had a deep understanding of the most revised standards last year. This year, we started working on learning targets. And as we move into next year, we're going to be looking at lesson design. And so in terms of that timing piece, if we're going to make a change, and we're talking about how do we design our lessons in a way that's more engaging and rigorous for students, it's like the perfect time. And so, just had to say it.
And certainly by having the 5 periods with TB20, it's less pace. Like you don't have so many transitions. You can really focus on 5 subjects or 4 subjects instead of 8 or 7, and really get good and proficient at those subjects. And we just all felt like, and even as teachers, we're just running from one thing to the next, 45 minutes and 45 minutes and 45 minutes. Let's just slow it all down here and really dig deeper and do activities and really look at our instruction, and we can have more one-on-one time with students from a teacher who that is like the expert of that subject, right? Greater opportunities. However, this was huge because this was one of the number one things that we had brought out from the scheduling committee 2 years ago, is a consistent daily schedule. Like that was one of the high priorities from that group, which we stuck to after that session, adding TB20, but we eliminated the Wednesday homeroom. It's a consistent schedule every day. And still with this trimester schedule, we will still keep that as a high priority of high structure, high routine on a day-to-day basis.
And so part of it too, in going through this, is the title of 3 slides prior was thoughtful discussion with purposeful responses. Is like, as we had these discussions, we kept coming to these answers that were the same. The answer wasn't initially, oh, we need to change to a trimester schedule. That wasn't the initial answer. But as we came back through trying to hit all the targets that we were looking at, it made more sense. But we didn't stop at that. We wanted to go through and do some comparisons and look at what other schools that use a similar schedule would do. So through the research of this, we kind of went through and we kind of compared it across the state as to where this is. So if you look west of Pierre High School is kind of the pinnacle point of trimester work in the state of Wisconsin. They started this in 2003. West of Pierre has been achieving at a high academic rate in making that switch, and so they've really almost planted that idea for other schools to feed off of that. I don't know the exact number right now, but I know for sure in the course of my research there's over 20 schools in the state of Wisconsin that are using a trimester school. West of Pierre was really one of the first ones to spearhead that. When we looked at those report card scores, and you look at that, you're like, okay, there's great growth, but are we exactly like West of Pierre? What's the same about it? What's different about it? So we started looking at some different schools, right? Homestead High School right now is one of the top achieving and performing schools in the state. Homestead, size-wise, fits a similar characteristic to us, but demographic-wise, completely different, right? They're a much more affluent school district on the north side of Milwaukee. Okay, so we're not going to quite compare in that range. So we started pulling apart some different similarities that we saw from schools. Obviously, some of the working class people, Wisconsin Rapids, right, Sauk Prairie area, you have some farming communities, you have some more rural type areas. Adams Friendship is a low socioeconomic area in the state, right, where they see some of the similar poverty dynamics that we might see in our school district. And then Green Bay East being a school district that has some diversity demographics that are similar to ours, where they have a population that is 40% Hispanic. They also have Native American population mixed in with some of the Oneida tribe that goes into that school district as well, and an African American population. And so in going through and analyzing, breaking these down, what we've seen from these schools is growth that has taken place. They have grown at a tremendous rate. And I shared this just like anecdotally, going to high school where I grew up in northeastern Wisconsin. Green Bay East wasn't known as a stellar academic institution, right? To the fact that their report card exceeded expectations. So clearly they're doing things at their school that are feeding their students in the right way. We put on the bottom of this as well as like the reminder back to where we were at. 36 in overall growth, 52 in math, 20 in ELA. Like the growth in math for us, Sauk Prairie is 64. It's not a ton different, but it's different enough to show that the changes that have been made from just that process for these students has been great. When going through and talking specifically, personally in conversations with two people that I know very well and trust, the principal at Sauk Prairie and the principal at Wisconsin Rapids, both of these individuals, I asked them, tell me flat out, what's the greatest impact that the trimester schedule has made on your school? The Sauk Prairie principal's, the overall basis of what he said is our culture and our building has improved drastically, just simply because of schedule switch. They haven't added like a TB20 idea, they haven't added a ton of pieces to it, but he talked about how the pace has calmed in their building and everybody has more joy and is happier in the school setting. What that looks like is different than how that feels. And when he continued to explain that to me, you can tell the great sense that there's a great deal of changing culture. And ultimately said, we're happier. Everybody's happier. Our teachers are happier, our kids are happier. Our overall level of happiness and joy has gone up. And this is, in 2015, they made this switch. They went through COVID, right? Some of the same thing that everybody else went through, and they said that their school just feels like it's a happier place than prior to that time period. In Wisconsin Rapids, it really came down to our ability to have deeper engagement with kids. That's what he said, our deeper engagement with kids. And to go at a greater depth in the classroom. It also forced our teachers to have to get outside of their shell a little bit and grow some of their progressive practices to be more student-centered in learning, as opposed to some of the old school lecture-based style of education. So the next phase of that then.
Yeah. So I am a part of the leadership team. I was not part of the scheduling process group. But as we were discussing this and having the thoughtful conversation, I did bring up the fact that I have taught in a 5-period trimester system. So I was asked quite often kind of what was my experience, what was it like. So to kind of give you quickly a little bit of my background, I first started in a middle school, 8-period day, very similar to here, okay? Then I went to a high school that had the 5-period trimester, and I was very, very nervous about that because I'm like, how am I gonna go from teaching 45 minutes to, at that school, it was 70, okay? And once I got into that, it was amazing. And one of the biggest things I had was the ability to follow up with kids at the end of every hour, at that time to go around and meet and work one-on-one to give the kids the individual support. And it was very, very powerful. When I made the choice to live up here and move up here, one of the first questions I asked myself is, what is your school schedule? And they said 8-period day, and I went, oh, I don't know if I can go back. But the reality is, whatever system you're in, you adopt and modify, right? But through these conversations, I was kind of going back to my remembering room of how amazing it was. And just like it wasn't as fast paced and it wasn't like boom, boom, boom. Because one of the biggest things I have right now is every day I feel like I'm rushing through to get what I got to get done and not always having the time to connect with kids one-on-one. And that's where the magic happens. And, so that's just a little bit of my experience. And originally 2 years ago, I was absolutely against any change. Okay, you can ask my wife. Like, I've been doing this, I'm year 24, 2 years ago, I said, I got things set, this is how I want to do things, but the reality is that was all about me. And so I started thinking more about what it was like when I was teaching in a 5-period day with that time, which was 70-minute periods, of how just less stressful and more impactful for the kids. And they left the room every day understanding things better than when I had them for 45 minutes. And I think the biggest thing is when we look at the dynamics of our student clientele, the more that we can get them to do in this building, granted, we want kids to learn how to do work outside of school, I'm not saying that, but kids are more likely to do something when they feel confident that they can do it right. And I think that's a big part of what I had when I was teaching in that 70-minute system.
So one of the big questions that comes up is like, okay, what's the process? How'd you go through this? So as a leadership team, obviously we came to the decision. We met with our staff last week on Wednesday and shared this information with our staff. The next step in the process was to share that information with you as a board. And finally, our final step in the process will be to share this information with students, which will take place on Thursday of this week, and then after that with their parents and their families in that communication. But one of the questions that comes up is like, well, what does everybody think about it, right? It's really easy to say, hey, after that meeting, how did it feel? We walked out as a leadership team as a whole going, wow, that was very well received, everything went well, but it's very much surface level. And so, great last minute planning on my part. I'm like, let's get this data, raw data on it today. And so I sent the email as fresh as it could be at noon today to ask our staff to respond to some basic questions. And one of those questions was, how are you feeling about the trimester schedule? With specific spots in there, if you can't read that. A 1 was like, not good, disappointed in this decision. 2, confused, unsure, have some questions, open to hearing more. 3 is I feel indifferent, neutral, but I'll comply with the team. 4 is anxious but optimistic. I may need support, but I'm willing to grow. This is going to be good. And then the last part is like, I'm very excited, I fully support this will be great for our school. If you look at this breakdown, 77.1%, so the purple and the green, are optimistic and excited about this change. The orange part is like, yeah, whatever, I'm fine with it, I'm gonna be on board with this. If you look at this breakdown, this is the only area, right, this little small chunk right here, everybody else showing support of something that we believe is going to be great for kids moving forward. The second question we asked in that regard was, regardless of my feelings about it, what will be my response to the trimester schedule? This is the part I loved on here. It's like the number of people that said 5, I want to be a leader in supporting this change and will advocate for its benefits. 31% of our staff said this. Another 51.8% said, I need learning opportunities, but I will gladly take the time to be great at this. And so, I was nervous, right? I know we were nervous when we said, should we put this question out there? I talked to Becky and she goes, oh, Gary and I were like, I can't believe they put this out there. We wanted honest feedback, right? Because I'll be honest, I said, I know Sean's gonna ask me a question. Well, what does the staff think about this? I'm like, well, I'm gonna be prepared. I'm gonna answer that question for Sean ahead of time here and say, we're gonna get that information. It could have backfired. Everybody could have said, this sucks. And we could have walked in and said, well, they hate it, right? But what we found was that our staff is supportive of this. And I'm gonna speak for Tony because he's not here, Tony Borden. Tony Borden is our most tenured teacher. And Tony said, Levi, I'm getting close. Not there yet, but I'm getting close to retirement. I could have easily said, I don't want to change anything. This will be really easy for me to say the same. But we're at a point where we've done the same thing for so long, we need to do something different to reach our kids. And we need to make these positive changes. And so in going through that process, right, we've come to a confident conclusion that this is the direction we're going. And we're grateful that we have an opportunity to share this with our kids as we move forward. We know it's not going to come without hiccups. We know that it's not going to come without some of the struggles that come with any type of change. But we're willing to take on that challenge as we move forward in this. Part of the piece that comes with it are questions that may come up along the way. Well, what does this look like? How does this play out? So we're sharing with you 2 different pieces because we don't know the answer to this yet. From a schedule standpoint, 2 different pieces, right? Either 73-minute class periods or 75-minute class periods. Basically, it's the same. It's just a matter of where's our passing time fit, right? Is it 5 minutes of passing time? Is it 7 minutes of passing time? We'll talk a little bit about that after Ty and Hope give their presentation on the next step as to where that decision will be made and why that becomes important. Ultimately, though, that breakdown keeps TB20 in our schedule because we've seen it as a vital piece of growth for our school in terms of connection, but it's giving us 73-minute block times. That breakdown of time, if you look at it, in our schedule for next year that was currently laid out, 172 days of instructional minutes, or instructional days, 86 split in half, right? When we take that into a trimester schedule, it's about 57 days per trimester. It's 57.3, but we round it down rather than round up. If you do the math on that, 45 minutes per class period in an 86-day semester, it gives you 3,870 total minutes of instructional time in that semester. But if you take the trimester schedule and you go 75 minutes or 73-minute periods, either of those 2 is putting us over 4,000 minutes of instructional time. So we're gaining instructional time with our kids, but it is condensed into a shorter period of time. So students will have classes that are broken up between trimester 1, trimester 2, trimester 3. That breakdown varies as we go through in terms of your year-long classes will now become two trimester classes. Try 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 2 and 3, depending on that breakdown. Your semester classes will be in 1 trimester. Each class in a trimester is 0.5 credits for a chance to earn 2.5 credits in a trimester. Throughout the course of the year, if you schedule a full load, you can earn 7.5 credits. 7.5 credits times 4 years is a potential to earn 30 credits if you don't take any study halls on that. Because class periods are longer, there's more time to work in some of that academic intervention. I doubt we will have many students that are going to try to earn 30 credits, but they have the potential to earn 30 credits, which gives them a great differentiation for the student that really wants to push themselves and for the student who needs to get over that threshold of 24. It gives us room to fit our students' needs. The typical teacher load, what this breakdown would look like for us in this process. Our teachers would have 4 administrative assignments. Those 4 administrative assignments could be 4 classes. It could be a combination of classes, some type of a duty, or credit recovery or lab that fits into that. One of their 5 periods in that schedule will be a prep period or a planning period as they move forward. Big question that came up from our team in going through this, what about common planning time? It's been great for us this year, okay? Our proposal in this and moving forward, and it'll be something that I'll push forward probably at the next board meeting with a potential slight change on our schedule, is that this is gonna happen with a monthly late start schedule that we put in there. Not a big impact on instructional time, but it'll give us a time as a staff to not have to carve little pockets of time to collaborate, but to have time to collaborate intentionally throughout the course of the year without really impacting our overall school calendar. More information will come on that though as we go. Like I said with the credits before, 2.5 per trimester, a chance for up to 7.5 per year. Any classes offered over 3 trimesters. In the research and going through this, when I've talked to the different schools, the only place that really needs to have 3 trimesters is your band or your choral, because they perform at different events throughout the entire course of the year. And you don't have students that are like, well, I'm just in band a part of the time, and I'm in band part of, like if you play the tuba and the other one plays the tuba, they need the tuba player the entire time. And so from this standpoint, is what they said is you spread this out over the course of the year. But one of our issues that we have is students that take both band and choir. It would really handcuff their schedule. So band and choir will become a combo class if they take both. So they will be scheduled in band choir, band choir, band choir each of the trimesters, and both the choir and band teacher will work together to support when they need those students in which of those class periods to give them the ability to get both. They won't earn more credit by being in both though, they'll just earn 0.5 for that for a chance at 1.5 in the year. AP courses. Most of our AP courses will be offered in first and second try. The breakdown of time in this is because AP course testing takes place in early May, we would lose like the last 3 weeks of the school year that would not fit in those 45-minute class periods with us. We're actually going to gain more time in each trimester, as we saw from that previous graphic, plus you would complete both of them through that process. So students would have the ability to get through more information in most of their AP classes, with the chance that they need support and to provide support for them with an AP resource or study hall in that third try. The Sauk Prairie principal said that in the first year that they switched to a trimester schedule, they had a ton of kids that took third try AP prep. He said last year they had about 10 because the number of kids realized, I don't need that extra time. I've already been prepared for this. And my teachers, our teachers do it already anyway, right? They'll like, we're gonna meet in the morning for a prep leading up to the test just to get your brain refreshed in some of these things anyway. Some could be offered during second and third try. Some of the different courses like AP Gov and AP Psychology typically have been more condensed, and some of those can fit into a different sequence as you go through on that. But ultimately, like I said, the teachers in the other schools have found that they actually have more time to prep than they did in an 8-period class schedule. Study halls, what about them? It's going to reduce the number of learning labs that we currently offer because that learning lab experience is hopefully going to be taking place in the classes, but we will have the opportunity for students to take 1 study hall per trimester. If a student takes a study hall every single trimester, they will have and pass every class, they will earn exactly 24 credits. So it is possible, but at some point in time there may be a buffer where they might double up because the class doesn't fit or something, knowing that they're going to get some extra support with that extended time in their classes. Athletic eligibility. Grade checks will happen 6 times a year now, mid-trimester and trimester end. And that'll just make that smooth piece as we go through. What about students with disabilities was a question that came up. One of the things that one of the principals said to me is he said, this gave us a great opportunity to have inclusion and put more of our kids with disabilities into classes with regular ed students so that they didn't feel like they were different, that they had to be pulled out of classes. They could provide support in those classroom settings with the extended time. It gave a greater opportunity for some diversified learning experiences that could allow every kid to succeed in that same setting. But intervention and support can also happen beyond that, obviously using the classroom, but also some study hall resource period time that we still have in going through that. Ultimately though, it's less classes to manage at a time, so it should be less of an academic impact in going through. Work-based learning. Work-based learning is tied to one period per trimester, usually in the morning or in the afternoon, and then some students, depending on their experience, can combine that with a study hall in that process to give them extended time if they needed to do so. So work-based learning still continues on at the rate or the pace that it can. Make up work and recovery. One of the things that there's extended time in class periods now where teachers can diversify some of that breakdown. Gary had alluded to that, like I can connect one-on-one with these kids. For the student that missed, you might have everybody started on something else while you're working one-on-one with that student who wasn't there for this to catch them up or to get them where they need. We also will have the opportunity for some teacher-led credit recovery sections to get everybody caught up to where they need to be, similar to what we're already doing in that process. It's an overview of the basic questions that we had. It's an overview of the process that we went through. But ultimately, I'll tie you back to that first thought is that our goal is to focus on learning. As a school, our main purpose is learning and focusing on learning and making this environment a place for learning where our kids understand that when they come here, our goal is to grow them in their ability to learn in that process. Anybody else thoughts? Okay. Questions?
Will there be any changes to the graduation requirements, or will the credit still be the same?
At this point in time, no.
Okay. And then, do you see students taking advantage of the opportunities and possibly seeing FTEs grow?
I believe that initially it'll probably be a little bit slow because kids will be tentative, I think, but as they realize how the pace slows down with only 5 classes, I think kids are going to realize that was way easier than I thought, only having 5 classes, and I think we're going to have more kids that'll take 5 classes.
Okay.
That's what's happened in some of these other schools as well, is that it started out slow, but then it's grown to that fact that kids realize they can take more and are willing to do so.
Good.
Yeah. Lisa?
How does this fit in with Start College Now scheduling?
I didn't hear you.
How does that fit in with Start College Now scheduling? Because that was always a difficulty. So how is that going to?
Yep. So we offer 0.75 for a semester class at the college level. Our goal would be to encourage kids to take 2, 1 in each semester. And essentially what that would do is we'd schedule you in first, second, and third try for Start College Now, and that equates to the 1.5 credits. However, if there's a student taking 1, typically what will happen is in that second semester where that buffer is, whether it's on the front end or the back end, the rest of that time will be filled with study hall or resource time for that student. But yeah, we encourage it to be the same. The same thing with the college classes that we teach here. Our college classes are taught here, the content is still going to be the same. It's just when the grades are submitted, so we'll be able to submit those grades for the grading periods at the university levels within that.
When you talked with those other schools, how did they see a influx in their tutoring after school? Because we offer a lot of tutoring, and now possibly we won't have to do that as much.
So every time we talk about that, most schools go, you guys are amazing at the tutoring that you do for kids. It's hard because a lot of schools can't get teachers to stay after school and do that. And so I'd say from that standpoint, it's not apples to apples in comparison. I won't have a fair, accurate representation as a drop or not, because it just doesn't happen at the same way. It's a great thing to think about. It's like maybe there'll be less of a need. I would be willing to bet that these kids are going to want to connect.
I could see it go either way, because we could potentially have students who take, like, that don't have a math lab. Like, we won't offer a math lab because we just give the support during class. But students who potentially still feel like, well, I don't have a math lab now, but I still want that support. So I see potentially that the tutoring could increase because we don't have as many academic labs happening. Or we maybe don't need this many tutoring because we have more time with students one-on-one in class. So I'm not sure yet which way. I can see it going both ways, actually.
Thank you.
Were there any schools that went to a tri-semester and then abolished it later on? And if so, what did they say? Did they say why they did that?
Yeah, in the process of going through that, I saw one, and I'm completely biased. Kewanee High School was our big rival when I was growing up in high school, and I hated everybody from Kewanee. But I said because they were soft. Their breakdown of it was that there were financial implications that they weren't able to support some of the programs that they wanted to because they shared teachers between the middle and high school. And by sharing teachers, their middle school wasn't willing to be on a trimester schedule as well, and so it created some imbalances of that. And it created more headaches for them every time they scheduled. And they're just like, I don't know if this is something we're going to continue. So they abolished it. But their scores actually went from whatever the base range was when they started it. They were in an exceeding expectations category for a while in the trimester schedule. I think it just recently, within the last couple of years, though, was when that switch was made to go away from it again. And it might have been a COVID connection with it as well. But all I know is there was implications about shared teachers and finances that went with it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, next is school safety.
All right, so the experts on school safety, Ms. Cameron and Mr. Peterson, are going to present to us.
Hello. Thank you for having us back to speak about school safety, which I have shared in the past is one of my passions. I'm going to try not to go too deep because I could speak for hours on school safety, but I'll try not to bore you with that. I have worked very closely with the Wisconsin Department of Justice Office of School Safety with Attorney General Josh Call in promoting Speak Up, Speak Out Wisconsin, the free anonymous tip line that the Wisconsin Department of Justice maintains. So when a student provides a tip, it goes through the Wisconsin Department of Justice, and their system is manned 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Myself, Mr. Peterson, Mr. Massey, and our SRO get immediate notification anytime that we get a P3 tip, which is the electronic system that house those tips through Speak Up, Speak Out. So the Wisconsin Department of Justice operates under these 5 preparedness missions for preventing or dealing with a crisis. And they define a crisis anything from a death in the family of one of our students all the way up to what we don't want to happen would be someone coming in here and causing a lot of damage to this building. So under these missions is how we prepare for any kind of crisis, whether that's a storm, water coming through the ceiling one day maybe, right? All of those things are what we prepare for. Natural disasters are included. So under prevention, this is what we are doing. We have started utilizing threat assessment, which is a multidisciplinary team that when we have finished our work in setting our behavior thresholds, we will implement one of 3 processes, either triage, which is a quick, is this a really serious threat that we have to address, or have we deemed it a very low level threat and we can just move on, to inquiry, which is we dig a little bit deeper, but we don't go through all 3 phases, which is a full threat assessment process, where we complete 3 phases of the threat assessment, including a plan to help that student off what we call the path to violence. We're also working with local law enforcement. As a matter of fact, on April 10th, we will be hosting here at Lakeland Union High School all of our feeder districts as well as local law enforcement to start working together to implement the SRP, the standard response protocols in all of our feeder districts so that our law enforcement agencies are operating under the same system at every one of our schools. So we will have them here on April 10th to move forward with the I Love You Guys Foundation process. Mitigation, we're using our drills, our fire drills, our active shooter drills, and then our building safety features, which we're moving forward with. Also in our protection, because some of those building safety features are notifications, the ability for our teachers to pick up a phone, dial a quick number, and say I either have a behavior issue that needs addressing, or I have a medical emergency. And we are putting stickers on all phones in every room so that any person in this building can get on the PA system and notify the entire building if somebody gets in the building and is trying to do harm. And then the response is our partnership and planning with emergency management that we're working through. And then critical incident response team. I am a member of the CISA 9 critical incident response team. I did a full week training. The Office of School Safety offers this free to every district in the state of Wisconsin. So they will bring in additional resources for us to deal with any crisis that we have here at Lakeland Union High School, including if we need additional counselors for student support or even staff support. So last month, February, team went to the behavioral threat assessment training that the DOJ offered in Merrill, Wisconsin, along with Wausau and Crandon. This team has started the process to implement that threat assessment protocol. In mitigation, we're putting those phone features Mr. Laureano is helping us develop, where we can send out through text message, email, even if we close school for weather or some other natural disaster like water coming in, we can send out information very quickly to our students, our staff, and the community so that they are aware of what's happening. We are increasing building safety. We're working on writing a grant to get additional funds to add safety features to the building. Mr. Laureano is also helping Mr. Peterson and I do that. A few of us went to the Attire Conference, which is a integrated response conference that we went to in Lake Geneva that brings law enforcement together with school districts to work on responding. While there, we heard from parents from Sandy Hook, survivors of Sandy Hook, several university critical incidences, and we had a survival panel where we listened to their experience and how they responded, which helps schools implement safety features in their building, because you don't think about things like, I couldn't text on my phone because my senses went laser focused. And so when you're hearing people talk about what they experienced and how law enforcement responded or didn't respond, that helps us learn and adjust so that we are ready if, God forbid, something were to happen here at Lakeland. And then in recovery, I am the critical incident response team member of CISA 9, but we would pull people from anywhere if we needed them. So additional safety measures under the vein of school safety. Mr. Peterson and I are always working to help keep our students and staff safe so that when they walk into this building, not only do they feel connected, but they feel safe, because we know that our students cannot learn if they do not feel safe in this building. And one of the things that helps us not feel safe is when we are in classrooms and we don't know what is in a backpack. So you're in the front of the classroom, imagine, and you've got 20-some kids in that room, and you have no idea what is in any of those backpacks. anything from drugs to alcohol to weapons. And go ahead.
Okay, so I was just like, even speaking with our student leadership teams, they come forward to Mr. Massey and they say, what are your concerns as far as academics, athletics, safety, and our bathrooms are an issue. And these girls would probably agree that our bathrooms are an issue, that we need to do a better job in safety doing. And again, having those backpacks in our building, especially coming from a law enforcement standpoint, makes me very nervous. And again, through other disciplinary actions where I've been in front of the board, I think I brought that up before, of different items that we have found in backpacks that are very concerning and that jeopardize our safety. So again, talking with staff, what are some of their concerns? Obviously backpacks, again, the unknowing, and then like Hope said, just the mere clutter of backpacks being inside the classroom or inside the aisles itself. So just doing some just really basic analysis of right, safety and security concerns, number one. That you can conceal different things in there that are going to jeopardize the safety of our staff and students. Number two, backpack weight. Literally, if you had an opportunity to feel the amount of weight that our students are carrying around on a day-to-day basis, is just not good for their overall health. Distractions. Kids are digging through their backpacks, and again, because they aren't using lockers, they have everything in their backpack. They're living out of their backpack. So you have bags of Doritos, and you've got gym shoes and socks and drinks and everything just pouring out onto the ground. Very, very distracting. And then obviously organization. Having use of their locker again will force them to be more organized and being ready and prepared for each and every class. Talking about cell phones. So cell phones on my end are very, very problematic, and the biggest thing for me that I see on a daily basis is cyberbullying. Cyberbullying of students using their phone to harass, to belittle, to tear down. It is just it's a daily basis. We see it all day long. We had a girl that was in our classroom, that was in my office, that was crying because she was getting cyberbullied. While she was in my office, her phone dings, right? She shows it to me, and it is yet another picture on social media of people tearing her down and things like that. The distraction of our teachers have, right? We say, listen, teachers, you have to make sure that nobody has a phone out in your classroom, so that as they're teaching, they're trying to look back. Is anybody trying to sneak out a phone? It's very difficult to teach and focus if they're trying to police cell phones all day long. Academic performance. Obviously, they're more focused on their phone than they are their studies. I need to put my phone away. So as I'm here right now and I feel it go zzz, 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 like every fiber in my body says, you should probably check that, right? So just being able to have that is very distractive. We talked about cyberbullying, social issues. Go ahead to the next one. Cheating, obviously, it's very, very easy to be able to have that phone in class, and I can take pictures of exams and I can share it from first hour to fifth hour. Their kids are very, very savvy with their phones as far as using it to have that academic dishonesty. And then health concerns, if you feel like going on and Googling the amount of radiation that we're getting from our cell phones, it's a real thing. It's just another reason of why we want to be able to have those away for the day. So I am encouraging us to be able to move forward with going back to using our lockers, going back to keeping our backpacks and our cell phones in our lockers from 8 a.m. to 3:30 p.m.
So, attached to the questions about the trimester, we had a few questions about backpacks and cell phones because we were getting the information. Let's find out how they feel about backpacks, truly. So in an effort to improve school safety, are you in favor of students keeping their coats and backpacks in their lockers all day? 82% said yes. And then regarding cell phones, in an effort to improve student learning and reduce distractions, are you in favor of students keeping cell phones in their lockers, vehicles, or at home from 8 to 3:30? 86.9% said yes.
So if you look at it, is this going to be a huge change? Right now, our students are not allowed to have their cell phone from bell to bell. If the bell rings at 8 o'clock and the second bell rings at 8:45, from 8 to 8:45, they are not allowed to have their cell phone out or in class. The bell rings, they are allowed to check their cell phone, go into the next class, the phone gets stowed away. This is not going to change except that their phone will now be in their locker. So they can't have it from bell to bell, so there is no change. If the bell rings, they're now able to go to their locker, change out their books, stay in communication with mom and dad. You need to take the bus home. okay, I was gonna say 10-4, but unless you're a cop lingo, I meant, okay, sounds good, and I'm on to my next class. So some of those things that we have talked about as an administrative team is saying, should we give them just a little bit of more passing time, right? To be able to say, maybe 5 minutes isn't enough, right? So we have a smart pass system right now that is actually tracking the amount of time that our kids use between classes, and it's showing that the 5-minute passing time is pretty close to what we need right now. So if we're able to grace them 1 minute or 2 minutes, that might give them enough time to say, we're not having a trade-off, we're just saying that we're giving you an extra minute. I love the 2 people that we picked for this, but Hope and I picked our 2 slowest walking staff members that we decided to be like, would they be willing to do this? And they went from Mr. O's classroom in the science wing. When the bell rang, they started their phone and they walked to a locker in the pool wing. They opened up said locker, they exchanged some items, they went to the bathroom, 1 male, 1 female, they actually used the bathroom, and then they ended up in Mr. Yankee's room, which is the farthest away. So they ran that 2 or 3 different times throughout the day, and our passing time is spot on. Our kids will have enough time.
Full disclosure, we did it too, but we are 2 fast walkers, so we had to get people that walked at a slower pace. So that is all we have related to school safety.
Yeah. So now, ultimately, I'll just steer it back to our conversation about the focus on learning. We want this place to be a learning environment. And the things that are detracting from that right now are some of the safety pieces, the backpack usage with the things that have been in there, and the distractions that are created from our cell phones. I know this will not be popular with our kids, but I can tell you, when my parents used to say this to me as a kid, I never got it, but as a dad now, I have to make decisions that aren't popular with kids sometimes because it's what's best for them. And so in going through that process, I also know though that our kids are going to be resilient and survive. They will handle this. We didn't have cell phones when I was in school or backpacks. And I'm standing here in front of you today, the miracle of God, right? But in that process, it's going to take some time and some consistency, and we will need to continue working through this with our kids.
One other point is that our 8th graders right now are on this same plan. So every student coming in from our feeder schools as an 8th grader is under this same plan currently. We can call it Away for a Day. So there's a campaign nationwide, if you want to Google it, for our middle school populations called Away for the Day. So just Google Away for the Day. Tons of information, tons of research. Most of our middle schools around, our immediate middle schools are on the same page. But again, it's a nationwide campaign. So every student coming in as a freshman, this will be no change coming from the middle school or the feeder schools.
Questions?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, next is Project Aware.
So as a requested item, a couple meetings ago, we meant to get Adam on here to talk about mental health and Project Aware and transitioning kind of where we're going in the future. We got him on an agenda, so all yours, Adam.
Just want to say thank you for this opportunity. We've done this 5 years. We're in year 5 of the grant. This is our last year of Project Aware funding from SAMHSA. So we need to make some preparations, and discussions need to be happening now if we're going to sustain the work that we've been doing for the last 5 years. I think there's some really positive things going on in regards to our mental health services here in our school district, but also throughout the consortium, our 5 school districts, all feeding up to, obviously, Lakeland Union High here. This is a really important segue because the scheduling conversation really ties to mental health. One, I'm really excited about that. Not because it's going to make my life easier, it's actually going to make my life a little bit harder. Scheduling my appointments into 70 minutes is going to be really difficult. What I love about it is relationships. There's going to be more time for relationships between teachers and our students. That's the essence of mental health in our school districts. We need more relationships, positive relationships, and more time to build those relationships to feel supported for our students in this building. So I'm excited about that. Obviously, Sandy Hook was mentioned. Not a really positive thing that happened in one of our school districts in the nation. But that's actually the driver of Project Aware. The administration at that time of Sandy Hook recognized we needed more mental health supports in our school district. 1, to combat this from happening again, but 2, to get ahead of some of these things, to be proactive. Get those mental health supports in place early on, and maybe we can prevent some of these occurrences from happening more often. So I just want to say thank you to Hope and Ty for all the efforts they do on a daily basis for safety here. Really important. And obviously, a big part of mental health. I made 15 copies of this. It wasn't enough. This was a big turnout. I didn't expect this large of a group. So if we could share some of this, but I will also make this available to anybody that wants to see a copy electronically. I'm really going to focus on this last year. We're in our last round of SAMHSA grant. Between July and December, we've had our biggest numbers of students accessing services, which is a testament to you guys. You guys have been the champions for this work from day one. We want students to know that they have an access point here at school because for one reason, it's more accessible. We need students to know that they have options to look at and families to know that they have options to look at through our school district. We don't own the agencies that do this work for us, we outsource it, which is hopefully making the staff members in this building a little bit more comfortable with a really heavy topic. We can't expect every teacher to be a mental health professional in our classrooms. We're asking a lot of them. And one of the things that I'd like to take off the plate is the mental health side of things. Let's outsource it a little bit. Let's leverage some of these providers that want this opportunity to work with our students to take something off of our teachers' plates. Also, some really useful information is happening in these counseling scenarios where our staff can benefit from that by using the same approaches. Let's be consistent. If it's happening in counseling, hopefully guardians are using it at home. Now our school staff can use it as well. So behavior A shows up, all three of environments are using response B. That's the end goal. But we have to do it better, and we have to continue to improve. We need the communication between these providers and our school districts happening on a regular basis. Johnny's struggling in our classrooms. What can we do? Well, our mental health professional likely has some ideas for you to try. And that's not putting it on our teacher's plate anymore. It's taking it off their plate, making them more comfortable, less burnout. Get off my soapbox and go to the hard data that you guys are probably most interested in. One is we have 17 different unique trainings related to mental health happening between July and January of this year. You guys are doing this work, you're training for this work. We just need to recognize it. These are all the types of training topics that relate to mental health in some way. Now, is Project Aware funding all these trainings? No. But you guys are doing the work. You're already training your staff to do it. Let's just make sure that they have the supports in place to follow through with some of these things and leverage the resources that are available. So I don't know if we can slide down a little bit here, Jose. I just want to slide down. So you'll see this is consortium-wide. These are the trainings that happen in that time period between, again, July, summer months, and January 1st of this year. I'm going to have you go all the way down to this portion. We have 16 active partnerships with agencies throughout the state. You'll see them on this map labeled. Obviously, this is our area, and you can see that there's a number of providers from other areas of our state. Why is that important? Because we're recognized as a deficient area for mental health providers. That's why we received the grant. We know that there's not enough resources for the need that we have for our schools and our students and our families. So now we need to leverage other areas, Milwaukee, Madison, Green Bay areas, the Wausau area. 16 different agencies doing this work for us. Why is that important? That sounds like a lot, doesn't it? Do we need 16 different agencies? Yeah, we do. The reason why is we want options. When I talk to a family that's interested in pursuing mental health services, I want them to make the choice as to what fits their students' needs. Is it in person? Is it using technology? Is it local? Is it out of our area? Those are all options that the family should decide. It's healthcare. We don't want to make that decision for them. We want them to have all options available, make an educated decision for themselves that's for their students' best interest. So again, 16 different agencies all listed here. Some of them are doing counseling, some are doing outside services. Therapy Dogs International. The dogs are not providing us with therapy. They're coming in to be a support animal in our building that students can leverage to help them regulate. That's not counseling services. Wisconsin Family Ties has been providing us with a parent peer specialist for the last 3 years, if I'm not mistaken, contracted through Project Aware. That parent peer specialist is an advocate in many, many ways for our families. One of the things that we're trying to do is increase engagement between parents and our school districts. That is one way we're doing it. This parent peer specialist has been very, very influential in bringing in some of our most disengaged families back to the fold to get them involved in our educational process. Again, a win for the school districts, a win for the family, but most importantly, a win for the student. Questions on any of those points, guys? Keep moving on. So, meat and potatoes, this is the numbers that I'm most interested in. It's the part that I, on a daily basis, spend the most time doing. It's the referrals. So from July to September, summer months, we had 12 families access services during the summer. We're not even in session, but they're leveraging us. They're utilizing us, even during those summer months. I have a 220-day contract with you all, so I work through the summer months, and some of those referrals do come in even when we're out of session. This is a great opportunity for us. We can keep connected with our families, we can get these services up and running before our school year even starts. Now we're getting into the school year. You're going to see those numbers jumped up pretty significantly. Why is that? Because our staff are identifying students with mental health concerns. Students are coming to us saying, I have a mental health concern. Families are coming to us saying, hey, we now heard about Project Aware. What can we do to sign up? How can we access it? Well, you get in contact with a staff member, a teacher. Any staff member in our building can help create that connection to Project Aware. Then I pick up the phone and walk them through that process. I do a lot of hand-holding. Pre-populating of referrals is really important. For some of my agencies, 15 to 20 some pages worth of referral paperwork. That's a lot. If I can pre-populate it with address, data that we know already, I'm making life easier for families, and it's expediting that referral process, which is a big barrier. Of the 12 that were referred in summer, 12 received services. Of the 49 that were referred between October and December, 49 received services. Now that doesn't mean all school-based. That can be community-based. That can be school-based. Again, offer options. If a family says, hey, no, school's got to be focused on school, great, we can do that. What can I do to make a community access point for you? Do you want to go to Aspirus? Do you want to travel to Lac du Flambeau and see the Family Resource Center? Or maybe to Woodruff and work with Majestic Wellness? Those are all options that families have choices on. Because some want it in school, some want it outside of school. We just want them receiving the services if they want it and are ready to access it. Exciting numbers. Down just a little bit further. A little breakdown of the consortium schools. This is what we expect. We expect that the high school has the largest figures because mental health concerns typically are showing up in those teenage years. Not saying that they do not have a place in our elementaries, but we're hoping that those elementary students that are accessing care are less than our high school students because that is the typical age at the onset. That is the typical age for some of these bigger diagnoses to show up. You'll see the breakdown of those figures right there. Your district is leading the way as we expected to because students have a voice in this a little bit more. They're invested in it and they're engaging with it. One of the things that we do have to be mindful of is there's going to be some recommendations for services from our staff members that don't get followed through with. It's again a choice. We might recognize a need. And even if a family says, no, we're not accessing the services because of A, B, or C, we can say, okay, we understand, but we're still available to you should you change your mind. That's powerful. Accepting the no is sometimes something we have to do, especially in this type of design where there is a difference between school education and medical care. In the end, if we can plant the seed, we give that family a choice to think about and maybe come back around to us. Okay, jump into the other portion of the slides. So this is just a breakdown. Now this is Project Aware as a whole throughout the state. There's 3 different locations for it, the Lakeland Consortium being one. Chippewa Falls also received the grant 5 years ago, and La Crosse School District. One of the things that we were able to leverage, and you'll see they're labeled down below, but UW Population is UW's data drivers, and they create these infographics, including the last one and this one. This is just showing some of the impact that Project Aware and greater mental health access can have on your community, your districts, the state of Wisconsin, all of these different areas. I think it's pretty profound when you really break it down how much this is changing the system, how much impact we're truly having for families that just have tons of barriers. And the barriers can be time, money, paperwork, you name it, it can be a barrier. And with Project Aware, we're helping to alleviate some of those barriers, making that access point right here in the school is more convenient for many. Transportation's a barrier. We're bringing the students to us using busing. We now can alleviate that transportation barrier, and hopefully more students are going to access if they want to. I guess the last few things that I'll mention, and I did not want to take too much time because I know you have a robust agenda today. is we do have a few things going on in the next month that are really important for school board to know about. 2 being focus groups. We are going to be asking 9th and 10th graders, and you'll see this in our parent newsletter, to join in a mental health focus group on the date of April 25th. My leads from Department of Public Instructions as well as Department of Health Services will be here on that date. UW Population will be organizing the logistics and running the focus group. I won't have a big part in it other than showing them the room, making sure that their needs are met logistically, and then stepping away. Why is that? I don't want to skew the data. Good or bad, I want to know what impact we've had in the last 5 years on mental health. And I guarantee there's going to be some really good. But I also guarantee there's going to be some really negative and room for improvement here. Do I think our system is perfect? No. But is there room for improvement? Always. And we will work toward that through these focus groups. I picked 9th and 10th graders specifically because those 9th and 10th graders not only got to witness this here at the high school level, but also in our feeder schools. I'd like to hear from them directly as to what's good and what's bad. On that same date, parents are going to have an opportunity to come to our school district and share their feedback as to the system. That is all happening the afternoon of the 25th of April here in this school district. 1 to 2 p.m. is our student group. 2:30 to 3:30 is our LAC, Lakeland Area Consortium parent group. I'm hoping to get a lot of participants into that just to share as much information as possible. We're capping it at 10. We have not hit that 10 registered participants quite yet. There is an incentive of a $20 Walmart gift card going to every participant with the option of being entered into a lottery for an additional $100 Walmart gift card at the end of participation. So we are incentivizing it. We're hoping to get some really positive feedback to help us move forward in positive ways in the future. The last thing, the day before that focus group, it's a little nerve-wracking actually, we're going to have a speaker in this building, and that's brought to you by the Mercer Suicide Prevention Fund. They are funded it. They ran charity items and donations came in excess of $10,000. They were able to get Kevin Hines, which I don't know if you know Kevin Hines' story, but he's a live suicide survivor. He jumped off the Golden State Bridge and survived that. Very few people have survived that experience. Kevin's one of them. And he's a mental health advocate sharing his story with students, with anybody that's willing to listen and be a mental health advocate. He's coming on the 24th to present to our students between 9:30 and 10:30. I'm going to have 7 or 8 licensed professional counselors in the building that day. Reason why is the topic of suicide is heavy. And this may impact some of our students and some of our staff members. I want to make sure we have professionals available if students are impacted or staff members are impacted and they need somebody to kind of process that emotion. Kevin Hines' story is powerful. I'd obviously invite everybody in the school board to join us for that day. The data, and this is the reason we're bringing Kevin in, the data shows our students that are struggling with suicide and thoughts of suicide are going to go to a peer first with that concern. We need to make sure our students know what to do with that. Not to just house it, not to do nothing with it, to make sure they're going to a trusted adult in our building to make sure that we can intervene with that family, with that student, and make sure that they're safe. That's at the core of all this, is the safety of our students, number one, their well-being, and avoiding that choice that's irreversible. The last piece, this is year 5. You have decisions to make. How do we sustain this work? The work that is happening in your school district with those 16 providers, 16 agencies can continue to happen, but you do need somebody to organize it. You do need somebody to do the day-to-day scheduling. You need to help those providers make sure that the students are logging in, that the students are pulled from class. There's a lot of day-to-day work that goes into this every day in this building. You need somebody to do it. Whether that's me or somebody else, I hope that that'll continue. I want that opportunity if the school board wants me in this role. This just works for me personally, but you have decisions to make as a school board with the consortium as a whole as to how you fund that piece.
I will also say, those of us who go to the consortium meetings, are very much in support of keeping Adam as our service provider, or service liaison, I guess, is the way we use it.
Yeah.
We're just working out the details so we can bring that forward to the school board, and as far as the funding matrix. Adam should also give himself credit for writing a grant that probably offsets a good chunk of that cost.
The consortium deserves that credit. That was schoolwork that was happening before my role. And I'm proud of that, and I'm proud that you guys chose me as that person. What I will say is we've had the biggest quarter of our 5 years in these last few months. Between January 1st and now, I have 33 new referrals in the consortium, 17 being LUHS students. It's wonderful. It's great. We want these students getting the care that they need, because in the end, if we can get them the care they need, they may not need the services forever. We may be able to build the skills that can make them successful in our building. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Adam?
Yes, sir.
We are going to be approving a CISA 9 contract for 36 days of a school psychologist. Do you feel that that's adequate for, in combination with what Project Aware offers students?
I think it's important that I will never say there's enough. What I will say, though, is a school psychologist and a psychologist in general, two different, very, very different roles. School psychologist is going to be very, very intertwined with your special education program and may not be doing your psychologist diagnosis testing that a typical psychologist will do. If we do want to use a psychologist for those types of testing, that full psych eval, a lot of these agencies are doing that work for us. But somebody like Michelle Root McDaniel, your school psychologist, she's going to be doing more of the testing for your special ed requirements. And I'd really defer that question to Ms. Savella, whether or not that's enough days. More is better. If we can afford it, more is better. I know that special ed, we have a lot of students entering it in right now, and those numbers aren't going down. So definitely a discussion for the school board to talk about some more. But no, there is a difference between a school psychologist and a licensed psychologist as well. Other questions?
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Okay.
So letter D, Scott was going to come yesterday to provide some updates. He's unable to make it today from POB. So the updates we'll provide when we have the next construction meeting. I'll be able to bring that to the next meeting and where we're at with the project and those things. In case you guys haven't noticed, the bleachers are gone. Their project is moving forward, and then there was snow. Just like normal. So that's where we're at with the project, moving that forward. The next item on the agenda is fundraising and towards the addendums. We did not get, there was a meeting about fundraising. Okay, first off, there's a very good meeting about fundraising. I would say I was very, very happy with the outcomes of that. We're looking at the addendums and the things that aren't approved as part of the project, as well as opening the opportunity for anybody to donate money to whatever they would like to donate their substitute. But we also are trying to put together a better media package so they can see some of the things that aren't in the project that could be added. One of those things would be the addendums of the ticket booth. One of those things would be an addendum of signage or anything on the back of these things. I don't want to speak too much without the pictures of it because it's really hard to explain without the pictures of everything. They should have this with the renderings and stuff like that this week. And then we should be moving forward, going out and having conversations with individuals with good media to show us and good, comparatives with that. Give people the opportunity to add to the project, put their stamp on it, as well as add to the functionality and to complete the total mosaic and create a somewhat flow of how our building looks and the beautification of our building. Though it is an outdoor project and may not have classroom motion to it, it is something someone will see when they pull up at our school, which is what gives it a lot of opportunity for people to want to donate to. So in doing that, we're going to move forward with that. POB does all the media stuff, paid for it. And we're going to put them through the paces and hopefully bring something back to the board to show them some things as we're going to solicit money moving forward.
Lisa. Is the fundraising intended for additions to the base price, or is the fundraising intended?
A little bit of everything. A little bit of everything. We want to itemize the things that aren't, so they know, and then have the scope of the project and give them the choices. of what they would want to donate to.
Who's on the fundraising committee?
You're looking at me, and then Foundation has offered some help as well. And then there's Lindsay, who's in the Point of Beginnings office as the spearhead.
It's not really a committee, it's just.
Trying to get it
Yeah.
moving. Yep.
I do believe we'll have to establish a committee, and I would recommend that we get some very popular people in this town, like Adam Redmond, because you get those individuals who have a strong rapport and positive relationship in this community, they can move a lot of mountains, so just a thought.
Regardless, the front work will still have to be done, that way we could,
Right.
at least got that piece moving, so.
Yep.
Okay. CISA? So you'll see in front of you, you have a CISA 9 contract, that's been gone through with Katie, with Jen, with Eddie. In regards to what we would like to have from CISA, you do see the addition of school psych onto the CISA contract for 36 days, that is equivalates to 1 day per week, or whatever you would need. That is a significant reduction from where we are right now. In regards to, there are, that could be a person that could just does the testing, moving us forward, and keeping that a very compartmentalized role. Not to mention, you have a couple other school psychs that could help you out if you get in a bind on staff. So that we looked at as a targeted reduction for what we actually need versus what we are purchasing currently.
Okay, I would accept a motion to approve CISA 9 shared services agreement for the 24-25 school year as presented.
Gary, is it possible to pull this and talk about this in closed? Because we have some other things that we talked about last year and the year before that have direct correlation on our psych services in our building.
Well, I mean,
I'll make a motion.
yeah. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there something you need to discuss about personnel?
Correct.
Well, I got a motion and a second. Either we
So
can.
my question would be this, is there any discussion on personnel that has to take place before we approve this contract? That you know of?
Not that I'm aware of here, but, I mean, contracted services is all I saw here, but, I mean, it's not, you either approve it or don't, or talk about it, doesn't mean, they need to meet one way or the other.
Is asking if the current person is contracted, or if the person is actually a member of the staff?
The person that this isn't, it's, the person that provided our services that we paid for education for had a caveat to the move in his contract that if we needed psych services, that we would go back to him at that point to get some of those services instead of purchasing them outright elsewhere.
That sounds like a personnel conversation that.
You talk more freely in closed.
That's why I'm just asking, and we can, because that
Prior
was.
to my coming here, but, so, yeah, we'll talk about it in closed. It's fine.
Well, yeah. So,
Okay.
I got the motion out. Do you want to just hold that motion until closed? First of all, it's not on the agenda for closed.
We talk about personnel in closed.
There's no names listed.
There's no names listed on personnel.
But it's obvious that it wasn't slated to be talked about in closed. We had it with this closed session, it have to be noticed.
Did you clarify that the motion is to pull the item and move it closed, or is the motion
Motion
to
is
go
to
to
approve
the
the
approval,
contract.
but we're holding it? There's a difference.
He made the motion to approve it, and there was a second. In closed session,
Is this something we can table to next month, or is this something we need to make a decision this month?
And obviously CISA would like you to move as fast as humanly possible, because they need to hire people based on
This
contracts.
whole dynamic then changes, I, that's the case.
Well, I don't have anything in closed session that said, that addresses this. Unless someone can see evaluation, consideration, notice of layoff, non-renewal, negotiation, go back into open.
Maybe we could just answer the question right now. So I don't believe we gave any specific modified teacher contracts last year. Regardless, you're talking about next year. So if you were to issue a special contract, that I guess would be a possibility. And then on top of that though, unless you have some kind of interesting agreement that's like a one of a kind, I guess I don't know that like you'd magically be able to enforce and be like, yeah, this is how you're gonna go. But you could literally take an individual on staff with a license for anything, psychology or otherwise, and say, okay, here's the normal day, even if they're in a new trimester schedule. Normal day means you teach 4 of these things and you have 1 prep, and one of those things can be traded for a period of being the psych or being whatever. But again, that will impact your counts with these people with class sizes. But I think you could do that.
Well, I have a motion and a second. So let's
Go
just do
forward.
roll call.
Mr. Seidel?
Yes.
Mrs. Noem? No. Mrs. Hunt?
Abstain.
Mrs. Peck? Mrs. Peck?
Yes.
Mrs.
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Mr. Bortz?
Aye.
Mr. Umling?
Okay, I'm confused a little bit here, so maybe you can help me. What does a yes mean?
Because you're going to cease a contract.
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll?
No.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Passed.
Is that approved?
6. 6
Okay.
yes.
Good.
1 abstain.
Next, we have the OB plan. Okay. Yeah.
All right, so last month this was on here, and I wrote this topic summary sheet a little while ago, so sorry it's a little bit foggy, but I was peeking at it and having a look. Long story short, I guess a couple things just to note, and if you read it, I'm not going to recite the whole thing, but in a nutshell, 14 years ago, everybody agreed basically to create this benefit for the teaching staff hired after Act 10, and basically said, okay, it's no longer the case that you get accrued days off and the magical formula and so on and so forth. We're going to this thing where it is an HRA, and as a district, we'll put $2,100 a year in your name into an account for teaching staff exclusively, or those covered under 118.22, for the purpose of separation at a later date. And there's a couple unique things. One spot in the paragraph uses the word, I believe it was separation or whatnot, but it does not use the word retirement. But the heading at the top of the paragraph says retirement. So actually when the compensation committee was going through and talking about some of those benefits, it came up. So that's kind of what pointed our attention to that specific piece of it. The other portion is that when I had gotten here a little over a year ago, they said, yeah, you actually don't have or never approved the final plan document that sets into stone the promise that you made 14 years ago or 13 at the time. And so we have people who are actually eligible this June for the first time after Act 10 for the benefit. And so we need to get it kind of solidified, get the plan document in place, and get it approved. The other piece to the puzzle is that at the time the decision was made, one of the reasons it probably didn't get fully decided is that the folks who were on the pre-Act 10 benefit, they would leave and they'd have some number given to them, whether it was $120,000 or it was $50,000 or $60,000. It depended on the individual, how many days they had accrued, if they worked till they're 57, 55, 62, all of those things determined how much money they would get because there was a formula for it. So at the end of the day, we're paying as a district 2 types of retirees. There's folks before Act 10 and there's folks after. Basically, the way that they left it at the time is this kind of confusing thing where what was happening, what Greg did and what I am still doing is send money down to Mid-America, and then basically some money gets sent back, and it's this weird little circular thing that happens. What we're trying to do is simplify that process and also get rid of having to have what's called an actuarial valuation, which costs like $5 or $6 grand every other year. So what this is doing, or what we're asking for tonight for the approval on, is a couple different things. And if you go down to the bottom, you can see the motions that are on there. I'm just going down there myself to double check on them, but basically one of the motions is to, first off, approve the plan document with Mid-America. You have to approve it so they can administer it. And again, the administration isn't just quote unquote, and I don't mean administration like administrators, I mean the administration of the funds by Mid-America. They have rules and criteria. So for example, you can't withdraw money from them for a trip. It has to be for medically eligible expenses under the plan document, or under the umbrella of the HRA rules. That is one thing that we are asking for approval tonight. It doesn't cost you anything. It follows through on the promise from 14 years ago, and we need to get that done so that when the first people come to say, hey, I want to get paid, or I want to utilize that promise that was made to me, we actually have a document in place that says we can do that. The next layer to it is actually saying, okay, we want to change this around a little bit. Like instead of sending money down and them sending us back and kind of dinking around, we want to do what's called a defined contribution plan. Ironically, it works out almost within probably $10,000 or $15,000 that the amount of money down there is almost exactly what is needed to cover everybody who has a balance that they've been slowly accruing over these last 14 years, and make them whole, along with the interest that the handbook said we'd give them. So I went back, I got the interest rates from Mid-America, and kind of did an approximate calculation and all that kind of good stuff, and worked through that process. So like I said, the good thing is now that we have an amount of money down there that almost pretty closely, like when you got $600,000 and I'm talking about 10 or 15, like that's pretty darn close. We can get those funds assigned to individuals. Here's some of the things you won't see anymore. You won't see a monthly bank rec anymore for Fund 73. Fund 73 will go away. The reason for that is when we send the money down there, it officially becomes that individual's money. Now the plan document regulates it and says you can't touch it until you separate from Lakeland Union High School. Okay, and there's things, for example, like termination. So if you show up to work intoxicated, that would exclude you from being able to possibly get those funds if you are not, choosing to resign or retire in a normal, professional, appropriate way. But those funds are actually earmarked as not ours. So like I said, you won't see a bank rec for that anymore. You won't have to have an actuarial study. The reason why money was being sent back to us was because we were paying for those folks who were pre-Act 10, who are slowly drawing funds. They send me, like, some of them send me emails with attachments, some of them send me envelopes of their bills or whatever. Some of them come in with a stapled pile of things like this. And we just kind of work through that reimbursement process for them. But we pay about, the last couple of years, I'd say $90,000-ish or so a year to those folks who are utilizing that old benefit. But basically, since we are budgeting for it in Act 10 already, and it was like going down there and then coming back, I'm saying let's skip that part. We'll budget for it as we go, which we're already doing. We'll still cut a check at the end of the year down to Mid-America, but it's no longer called Fund 73. It's theirs unless they pass away and their spouse passes away. Then those funds are given back to us / applied to the next end of year contribution that we would make. So hopefully that rings a bell a little bit. I don't know how long some of you have been on the board, but if you were here around that time, hopefully some of that sounds familiar. And that's the short story on it in a nutshell. Questions, concerns, surprises?
So one of the concerns always with fund balance was having a reserve in fund balance that might have to cover that OPEB liability. Are you saying that now with redesigning this plan, we wouldn't have to be concerned about that?
Yes, essentially, like, since they're not doing an actuarial valuation on it, they're not going to make you do that study, and hence I think when you guys started doing that study, again, like I wasn't here at the time and I don't know what was going on prior to that, I don't know that people thought that way. I have gone back as far, and Lisa has provided me the documentation from LUHS around when the actual designation to fund balance was made for that.
I don't know if there ever was an official designation.
There was, like, we found it, it was done by the board, they set money aside, 2 different occasions actually, and, which again is fine, we will be on this pay-as-you-go, and many districts do it that way, like, I've been in 2 districts now that have done it that way, besides this one, and it's not uncommon, and again, it avoids that actuarial valuation. You do have to be cognizant of the fact that that promise was made, you still need to honor it as a school. It doesn't change the status, but it does, again, avoid kind of some hoops to jump through and makes it, I think, a lot simpler.
So if we enact this plan then, and that minimum is no longer a concern, do we need to reverse that action?
I think we'll reverse that action, and I will bring to you guys like the originals, so you can see what was done, because some of you maybe probably were on the board at the time, and some of you maybe weren't. But we can share that with you and get that to you, and that'll be kind of part of, again, as we go on the path of paying for the bleacher project and those types of things, we'll need to have a common understanding around what I'll call spendable fund balance or unrestricted fund balance. But again, the alternative, if you said, Eddie, well, what if we don't do that, or what's the other strategy that you could do? You could have it as a defined contribution plan, and you could also send all of that money down to Mid-America. But when I run the numbers and I look at that, first off, it's about $1.4 million. So you literally have to cut another big check like that. You lose the interest on the money, and now it's officially down there. And the only way you'll see it is, again, upon death certificates and things like that. And right now, like in this interest rate environment, it's a huge advantage for us. You can say we made X dollars on interest last year and it paid for this or paid for that, however you want to call it. But again, like that 1.4 million in terms of what the interest it's earned us is actually helping offset those costs. So I would encourage us to hold on to it and again, just pay people as they turn in their receipts, and it'll be, I think, fine as long as we're all cognizant of the fact that it's a promise you have to uphold and move forward.
So can I just say it one time in the way that I understand it? We're still keeping the commitment.
Mm-hmm.
We're just changing the way we're going to fund the equipment or the document that's going to fund it.
Yes.
So the
Yep.
vehicle, whatever you want to call it.
Yes, we're going to save ourselves the study.
And hopefully get some interest and
Yes.
not pay so much overhead on it.
Yes, and it'll make our audit easier. There's things in there that talk about defined contributions right now that will go away because, the OPEB, all of that will go away because we're not going to have to deal with 173 anymore.
Okay, I would entertain a motion to approve the OPEB plan document and handbook amendments as presented.
So
Motion and a second, roll call.
Mrs. Noem? Mrs. Hunt? Yes. Mrs. Beck?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink? Yes. Mr. Boards?
Aye.
Mr. Umling?
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll?
Yes.
Mr. Seidel?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes. Okay, next is the internet update, E-rate contract.
All right, we're gonna be presenting for the Department of Technology 3 items in the agenda. I'm gonna first jump into the E-rate for fiscal year 24-25. Internet update, then we're gonna slide into the hypervisor server replacement end of life, and then the cybersecurity initiative. So the first one is the E-rate program. Is basically an equation, 70%, 30%. That's the equation that we navigate. 70% is discount, 30% local cost. So for this year's bid, what we did is we requested a 1 gigabyte bandwidth. Also, and that was in the proposal, a 2 gigabyte bandwidth, just to see what the prices come up. Also, we requested a proposal for a bundle package, i.e. Be consolidated onto one provider fully, just to mitigate calling in case of downtime many providers. And also in the proposal, we included the annexes. That means wings, store, and the transition center. The outcome of that, we're gonna continue. The outcome was we're gonna continue with the current contract. We're gonna continue with WISCNet as the ISP internet service provider. We're gonna continue also with Teach, so there's no changes there. Teach is gonna do the circuit and the tube. And the two annexes will continue with Spectrum. The breakdown that I have listed there for the whole package was 70% discounted. From the grant, from the programs will be $8,021, and 30% will incur total cost of $3,437. That's the breakdown for a total internet service of $11,459. Now, I just want to highlight that we explore a lot with the bundles with Frontier, which came very, very with a good price, but we requested for them to provide some comparable district that also, in order to guarantee a full provider, a full commitment when we dive into it, because their price was really good. It was attractive, but they were not able to meet those comparable locations that they did. Two locations were in Illinois and two in Wisconsin were very small, not our size. So we were very concerned that, let's say, testing happened tomorrow and during assessment of ACT and internet goes down, we have some questioning. We cannot, that's time that we don't recover. Now, from a spectrum side, it was very, very good. Is the fleet that we want, but it was not, it was too expensive for us to dive in it and jump into that with them. Not until, on the condition that we are examining is, not until WISNet membership, it gets expired. That's the caveat, because it will outprice us. So we're gonna continue, give it a shot another year, and that's what we're gonna be doing. Any questions so far with E-rate? It's just same song, same dance. Good. All right. Now we're gonna go into the hypervisor. John will dive into some of the details of this project. All right.
All right. So I thought it might be a little bit helpful for you to actually see what we are requesting when it comes to the hypervisors. So this is what's known as a production server. It is currently not in production because it has been end of life for a while. So we use it for our for our students to play with in order to get to know them, actually understand what it's about. So in a nutshell, server, like a hypervisor, aka host, its job is to run 24/7, 365 days a year for many, many years. Like a server's job is to really never see downtime because it is running your entire infrastructure. Your HVAC, your building controls, your plumbing, you have your account and directory services, your printing, literally everything in the building, that is what a server runs. As listed, the lifespan is about 7 to 10 years. We bought these, our two current production servers, not this guy, in, let's see here, January and February of 2016. So they've seen just over 8 years of production. And the manufacturer has posted that it is end of support in January of 2025, meaning that on January 31st, 2025, if anything happens to any of our two production servers, we are out of luck. We cannot receive any help from anybody whatsoever. Everything is on us. That's it. So, that being said, we have gone through the process of sending out a request for proposal to get quotes from, let's see here, we sent out requests to 4 different vendors. We got 4 quotes back, but 1 vendor did not respond. And yeah, let's see here. They are, there we go. So, went through our RFP stage, sent out the proposals, also went through our scoring guide stage. Basically, our scoring guide was based around the fact that we are moving to what's known as a hybrid infrastructure in terms of our actual tech infrastructure. That means that we are hosting some resources on site, but we are also looking to actually migrate some of our resources off-site and into the cloud. That will reduce any faults, any actual risks that might occur of anything happening inside of the building that might cause any downtime to any of our infrastructure. So that being said, we didn't want to go with any servers that had more resources than our current actual servers. We wanted to stay kind of in the same ballpark as to what we currently have, and we encouraged our vendors to do what they thought was best for our servers. So we scored it based on that, and we also scored it based on the different relationships that we have with vendors. You know, like I've had about 4 years of experience working with each of these different vendors that we spent or that we sent proposals out to. So kind of based on how well do they handle actual projects of this scale. Let's see here, so now we're at the point where we're at our board recommendation. We have the actual quote, actual proposal that we would like to go with, that we are presenting to you now. After that, we are going to be ordering them and all the components that come with them. We're going to be coordinating dates. We are going to be installing these servers and actually migrating all of our services off of our current to the new ones. And then we'll be actually pushing them into full production and letting them swim without the floaties, so to speak. So, going through our scoring guide, I won't go through everything unless somebody asks any specific questions. Basically, we have a quote from High Points. They went above and beyond and decided to send us 2. They sent us one from Dell, which we kind of wanted to stay away from because we have not worked with Dell in the past, and due to it being something of this nature, being actual high production, like we don't want any downtime and we don't want any risks associated with this, we would like to go with their first option, which was from HP. We currently run HP in our environment. We like it, we appreciate it, we're very familiar with it. That's where we want to roll with. That one came out dead average between all of the quotes at about 53,000. So that is what we would like to go with. Are there any questions on that?
Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve High Point number 1 for approximately $53,000 FY24 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Motion second discussion.
Do we have money, was this part of our budget for this year?
It was not. So you had asked me in an email, like, I put in this month's, what do you call it, type summer sheet, just for monthly update that I'm working through some mid-year budget adjustments, meaning taking accounts that have underspent funds, that the folks who are responsible for spending money in those areas don't have a plan to spend, or things have changed, or whatever was originally intended is not going to come to fruition. And so some of those changes are what's reflected in those budget transfers. So that is a good example of moving money from other areas into technology to help support some of these different things that we're trying to wrap up at the end of the year. Pole vault pit, I was not here last month, but the pole vault pit is another example of that. And kind of as we talked about the other day, again, like we keep coming in under budget, not necessarily because we don't need things or we don't have things that need to be done. Like these gentlemen just told you, servers are no longer supported in December. It's only about 7 months away. We could not be in a scenario where you can't get support for the network. That'd be a major problem. So again, I think we're trying to get better at utilizing the resources we have. In no way do we mean that we're wasting or just going to town spending for fun. It's literally an accrual of things that need to be caught up. Your bleachers are another example. The list goes on, but that's where it's coming from, and that's those transfers are helping support some of that. So when you guys get reports from me, you don't see huge positives in some places and negatives in a bunch of other places. And I'll probably do that again as we get closer to the end of the year. So.
One thing that I want to add is we strategically added this critical piece of equipment in our roadmap is because of opportunity. If we see that it's going to end of life in January 2025 and we're going to go and upgrade in July 2024, risk with interruption in operation was critical for us to deploy this equipment, get it on time, mitigate any risk associated with school. And then January 2025 happened. We're in the school year. There's a flawless transition. So that's why we slide it in there.
Heidi.
Okay, my only concern is the comment that was made in our board packet that says, this month we're receiving a request for the server room upgrades and other potential items. It's imperative we spend the funds we've been given for 2 reasons. We need to demonstrate our need for funds. You can't go to a referendum and still make contributions to our fund balance. I mean, these are seriously needed. I mean, I took that comment wrong.
that we're just spending because we needed to spend the funds. I mean,
Well,
I'm confused.
there are things
Yeah,
we need.
and I think that's a lot of the confusion of board members is that you think we're just trying to spend and get to a referendum. That's a lot of the comments we've got to. This is not the case, quite the opposite, really. I'm talking about people's jobs and things of that nature. We need this, to say we are behind on some of these things is a joke. We are way behind.
Call the question, please.
Well, hang on, are you done answering her?
I'm done.
Okay. But,
I'm asking you to call the question for the vote.
oh, okay. Question's been called, roll call, please.
Mrs. Hunt? Yes. Mrs. Peck?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Fink? Yes. Mr. Bortz?
Aye.
Mr. Umlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll?
Yes.
Mr. Seidel?
Yes.
Mrs. Knoll? Yes. Mr. Smith?
Yep.
Gary, do we need to approve that 34, 37, 86 in the H previous to this?
Oh, you might have to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because there's
Yeah.
cash on that as well,
Yeah, you're correct.
the internet update. I would make a motion that we approve that as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the
Did.
internet.
So moved.
Motion, second, roll call.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Mr. Bortz?
Aye.
Mr. Umlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll?
Yes.
Mr. Seidel?
Yes.
Mrs. Knoll? Yes. Mrs. Hunt? Yes. Mrs. Peck?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes. Okay, next is the cybersecurity.
Okay, so the last item that we have is the cybersecurity initiative at Lakeland. Just to give a little bit of background, in fiscal year 23-24, we made a lot of progress on the cybersecurity front, and I'm gonna list some of them as we navigate through this initiative. But one thing that I want to highlight, as even though we made a lot of progress in that front, we experienced last September a breach, which involved multiple of our accounts that were compromised from staff members. Some of the indirect costs, and this is for putting into context, some of the indirect costs that we had was $5,000 in deductibles, plus an insurance policy that may increase when it gets reviewed in July based on that incident. That's how the insurance works. And also, when the dark web scan report was done last January, we found over 100 plus accounts that were in the dark web found. All right. Also, some of the items that we have been seeing in the cybersecurity is in the state of Wisconsin only has experienced 13 incidents, all in schools. All in schools. We are the most vulnerable population, and next door, our neighbor, Rhinelander, lost $90,000 in losses. So that's where we at right now. Some of the things that we have done this year already in the tech department that we have been deployed, this is all low-hanging fruit, almost no cost. We have rolled out 2FA, 100% for all our staff members. We also did the Keeper's Vault platform, which is basically a platform that keeps passwords for high-level users that have permissions in some of the databases that we have. We have updated our firewalls. The main building, also including our annexes. We did some Google hardening settings, also deployed Safe School training modules for our staffs. And also, we have been working all this year with our insurance with their recommendations from that event. Some of the ongoing things that are pending tasks are email data minings of those 4 accounts that were targeted. All right. So basically, the initiative is going to be composed in 2 phases. The first phase that I propose is a test of our environment. It's an internal and external test that it will be very invasive, that will identify all the security threats that we have. We do that part, and is in our packages. That is going to be composed of the internal testing, social engineering, phishing, exploit vulnerabilities, and all that kind of stuff. And then once we understand those, on phase 2, we're going to do basically an assessment of those findings and implement solutions based on those results that were presented to the board in that report. that's gonna come based on those findings. Now, we anticipate some of those already in there as those are the deliverables, because I anticipate expecting those that are going to be flagged, because there were already some of the vulnerabilities that put us in that situation last September. So, some of the risks that we have here is policies such as FERPA and SEPA. What I propose is to basically start in fiscal year 24, in this year, only do the testing, the environment test, understand, get a baseline, where are we at, and then in fiscal year 25, recommend the items from that. This is all recommended from our insurance company, and as well have an educated comparison with other providers to see what is better for our environment, who bids. We're gonna bid it out based on those items that we have. Again, this is all pending on the results, and then in phase 2. Now, phase 1 is the only thing that we're gonna do in fiscal year that we propose on 24, and then phase 2, 2025. That is part of our roadmap that we have in the cybersecurity. Any questions so far here?
Go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Did they give you an idea what bid, phase 2 might cost down the road?
Oh.
Okay. And do we?
We know. We know these are ongoing, like recurring costs, and I think I want to explore other prices. I believe I attached it to one of the quotes in the package, because this is not entirely done. I want to make sure I get a good assessment of different providers that are comparable. But the plan is there. This is what we need. We just need to understand who are we going to go with on a 12-month, and then we expect. But this is what everybody's doing. And when I went to Brainstorm Conference, that's what everybody, every school district is very vulnerable. We hold a lot of information.
Okay.
But I can send it to you, Sean, if it was not there.
If you're gonna send it, just send it
To everybody. Yep, absolutely. I
I'll
mean, it's there.
entertain a motion to approve the environmental test FY24 and the initiative FY25 as presented.
So moved.
Motion second, roll call.
Mr. Bortz?
Aye.
Mr. Umlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll?
Yes.
Mr. Seidel?
Yes.
Mrs. Noel? Yes. Mrs. Hunt? Yes. Mrs. Peck?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes. Next, we have the treasurer's report. Does anybody have any questions about the expense summary, checks, payment reports, or balances? If not, monthly financials. I would entertain a motion to approve checks and procurement and card transactions from February 1, 24 to February 29, 24 as recommended.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second, roll call.
Mr. Umlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll?
Yes.
Mr. Seidel?
Yes.
Mrs. Noel?
Yes.
Mrs. Hunt?
Yes.
Mrs. Peck?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Mr. Bortz?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
Yes. Next is the board agenda planner items. Financial audits.
Is it still there?
I would say if she can't get in.
Can you text me her email?
Yes, give me 1 second here. It is KDOMMER at LAUTERBACHAMEN.com.
That one?
Yes.
Let's see if she's able to join.
I can't see the cold one.
I'm texting her right now. Texting back.
We lost Barb?
No, the auditors that you were hearing crunching all the time.
Oh, that was
the auditors.
Yeah.
What is that?
Here, I thought it was
Click
Barb.
that it's-
Yeah.
I know.
I text her.
If I get her on her, well, Barb is down here.
Yeah. Here it was, I didn't know.
Well, yes,
I didn't
because
either.
you are in this meeting, she'll be able to.
Am I in the meeting? Do I have the?
If you don't have that.
Yeah, I don't have it on. She got the email, so it's just not.
Is this something we can do without them?
We can, like, I can talk you through a couple things.
Otherwise, we can postpone to next meeting.
Okay, let's move on.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Are we moving on?
I'm just gonna comment really quick here. Okay. All right, so we brought down, I think we brought copies, everybody's got a copy, there's two lovely audits in front of you. A little bit of light reading if you're interested. So long story short, we can see if we can get her to come back or come up next month. Jose did do a test with her. It is technology, it happens. Yes, Barb knows all about that. So, and we used to have this. This gives me like COVID relapse and trauma to trying to do recorded board meetings with Google and our camera in Merrill, which just never cooperated. Anyways, so long story short, I guess here's a couple of the highlights. You have the audits. In terms of, I guess, key things, what I would do is first off, when you look at the first one, you can go through, you can look at the financials. There are things in there, particularly on page 9. I think it's a nice highlight for board members to understand. I know we use the term fund balance loosely. I will include myself in that because it's easier. But that page does a nice job of, I guess, explaining / showing some of the differences between this thing called fund balance and what is actual cash. And so, again, when we talk about that, have a look at that page if you haven't. Cash obviously is listed under your assets. Fund balance is listed under equity. And so again, it just kind of gives you a little bit of breakdown. So we're using those terms loosely. You have a little bit of a broader understanding of what fund balance means. Fund balance is things like receivables as well, and other things that aren't necessarily cash in hand. In terms of the opinion letter we got, when you do an audit, I don't care who the firm is, and again, this firm is new to the district, no auditor says, super amazing job, nicely done, do it again and have a nice day. They do things like, you have an unmodified opinion. And so like, that's equivalent to the pat on the back and nice job done. You don't ever get the satisfaction of that. So we basically have an unmodified opinion. They had no findings, no major issues. Last year, if you recall, we did have some things with a food service account at one point, which we kind of had to re-go through all that. At the end of the day, it was funny because by the time we were done, I told Bob, I think that we were off by literally a few dollars for like days of rechecking, reworking. Randy was checking counts and I was checking counts, and at the end of the day, they just said, all right, thank you. And there was no change, no penalty, no nothing. So on one hand, I'm happy about that, but on the other hand, I'm extra happy that there were no issues this year, and they didn't note of any findings. In the management letter, they made a couple notes of things that we will look at going forward. And I just made a quick list there. 2 of them are GASB changes, technical things that we'll pay attention to going forward. GASB number 100 and 101, one has to do with compensated absences. Good example of kind of paying attention and monitoring that is our custodial staff actually accrue time off. So right now, and I think we kind of talked about this like as part of comp stuff, but if I'm a new 12-month custodian, I don't get vacation when I get here. I have to work a year to earn it. And so the notion that at June 30th, because they all started at different times of the year, they have accrued time off that is owed to them. And it has monetary value. And so GASB is kind of sticking their hands in that to say, yep, everybody should be reporting this. It should be done in this systematic way, blah, 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 blah. And not currently all places are doing that. So that's why it's coming out as a GASB change and something they'll be looking at. And it'll be another spreadsheet that we have to create and share with them. So outside of the technical GASB stuff, they did have 2 things they wanted with capital assets. One, we've got a long list of stuff, of basically things that we've accrued over time, and I would say that we've not gone through maybe the disposal process. Maybe, Lisa, we haven't done like a thing in the past. I know we haven't while Bob and I have been here, but I don't think we've come to you guys in the past and said, we'd like to officially dispose of the following. And go through the list of all these things that get basically depreciated over time.
So when we follow the policy guidelines.
Okay, so one of their requests though is that like we have some policy and some procedure around doing exactly that. And so it kind of becomes part of what we do in terms of the annual audit preparation. So that's one of those items. Again, not a finding, just a recommendation to kind of take us to that next level and get us to just be a little bit cleaner, a little bit farther down the line on goodness or unmodified opinions. Next thing on there, they would like us to update our fund balance policy. They don't like the fact that it just says cash flow borrow. I was actually okay with that because I kind of know what that number is, and you guys see that every month with the cash flow tracker. You kind of have an idea, but they would like us to get a number or a percentage, and we can do that. That's not a problem either, but as I mentioned in an email recently to all of you, that would be a healthy conversation anyways. So again, that's something that I do want to get done, and we'll make sure we get it on the next policy agenda and stuff for discussion, but I want to make sure it's done for the next audit. So when they get here, I can say, yep, we did one of the things that you requested, and thank you. So again.
There isn't, the old policy had a number in it. When we went to Neolia, it changed it out, so yeah. Good catch on that.
Well, and again, we can get to that. It's more of a healthy discussion, I think, to get to the number, more than it is worrying about what the number exactly is. It's about common understanding. So, last one is community service. And I think that DPI has been a little bit confusing on it. And actually, I've had different answers from 2 different auditors. CLA treated it differently and was very strict. I didn't much care for Stuart's opinion on it, but regardless, the new auditors are going to be a little more flexible on it, and I like where they're going. But essentially, at the end of the day, you have these things happening in your building that are what I'd call community service types of things. We have gymnastics happening all the time. We have youth swim. We have summer camps. We have blah, 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 blah. The list goes on. At the end of the day, there's some level of day-to-day utility. I'll call it things like electric, gas, you name it, things like that, that we kind of need to revisit, I think, what we charge for facilities. And the most important thing here, like right now, I believe we do a lot of things very, in a very loose way to support the community, which isn't a bad thing. The challenge is that when you start billing things to Fund 80, they expect you to bill Fund 80 the same way you bill non-Fund 80. So, for example, you can't say, well, we're going to bill the heck out of Fund 80 since we can levy extra for that and it's outside of the revenue limit, but we're going to let all these other groups that we like or whatever, if historically allowed to go for free, we're not going to charge them. So it's like bringing uniformity across your practices for facility use. Emily's smiling over there. Like we've started to have some of that conversation, so that will bring itself probably full circle in the next couple months, so that we can probably implement some change for next year, but also this year you will see us putting some version of billing based on the facility schedule that is filled out. and assigning some cost to Fund 80 to better utilize that fund. And again, a good example tonight, Adam Nowak, that program is part of that discussion right now. We've got other things keeping track, or sorry, people keeping track of time, like graphics a little bit, Officer C, like there's various things that these people are doing for things that have nothing to do with the day-to-day high school operations. So we're gonna really try to start to go down that path and get it nice, tight, and clear. But those are a couple of the highlights that I think maybe are more meaningful to you guys. Again, there's probably like over 100 pages of fun there. But the STAR audit is also there available to you. And again, the STAR audit, the report does include their annual deficit and things like that, so you can review it. But again, if you guys have any questions, we could talk about this longer than maybe not needed. So, any questions on audits? And I guess ultimately, do you want, if we cannot, if you guys want, I can see if Christina can come up here next month, but we had a great experience with them this year, I would say, and actually MHLT, I think, has approved them to be their auditor. And so
That was my only question, is how did you like working with the new auditors that, you know?
they were wonderful. I've had CLA a little bit in Merrill and here the first year, and whatever. I'm
Positive change.
Yeah, I'm super happy with the change, and they've been very easy to work with. So, and they've been really good they work with Lisa, Lorinda, other requests and things a little bit to Jen and other people. So I think they were very easy to work with.
You don't have a year-long list of things to do to finish the audit this year?
No, we were wrapped up. They took us on as a late client. So Bob and I were getting some emails like from DPI like, hey, it was due on December 15th, you know, hey, you know, we're past December 15th, and like these lovely little reminders. But at the end of the day, we turned it in like right away early in February. Again, they took us on because we got such late notice that we were getting dropped. And in the end, whatever, technically we're late, but I talked with Mark Elworthy at DPI and said, really, unless you get late past us by 90 days, we're good. Meaning there's other fish to fry and districts that are struggling more than we are. So I think we'll be more on time next year, seeing as they know we are a client and they will have plenty of time to get in and get their things done. So.
Is there someplace on here that we can see our outstanding commitment to those bonds that we shoot for that Act 32?
I would guess, I shouldn't say guess, there is. I'd have to dig and find if you want. I can follow up with you guys and tell you exactly where it is. There is a debt schedule too, if you wanna like see it in a nicer place, like that's gonna be like a one line item number that's crammed everything together.
Okay.
The actual debt schedule that shows what we owe from the energy efficiency projects is really nicely laid out in a table in the appendix in the annual meeting booklet, so if you want to see.
I just didn't know, I thought maybe bond liability would be.
It is, it's in there. I'll have to dig it out for you.
Yep.
Okay, would you guys consider a motion to approve the audit reports as presented for the Lakeland High School and Star Academy for the year ending June 30th, 2023?
So moved.
Motion second, roll call.
Mrs. Carroll.
Yes.
Mr. Sedell.
Yes.
Mrs. Noem.
Yes.
Mrs. Hunt. Yes. Mrs. Peck.
Yes.
Mrs. Fink.
Yes.
Mr.
Barry.
Bortz.
Aye.
Mr.
Page
Umlin.
47.
Mr. Umlin.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes. Next is changes to staffing.
Okay, so as we had shared with you on the compensation committee, one of the things we wanted to discuss and open was the slide that had the staff reductions on there. As I am not going to call out individual names because we are a small district, I am going to talk in generalities. On that slide, there were 3 teacher FTE positions, 2 student services FTE positions, 1 paraprofessional aide position, 2 hall monitors, some shared services discussions in regards to some things we've already talked about, but also in regards to partnering with MHLT, and then some attrition based upon retirements that we know are coming. What I'm asking for is on that overall discussion, just on having the concept of approving that level of position reduction by the board.
Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion second, any discussion?
So we're just giving you the right to propose it. We're not actually approving it.
The names will come
Okay.
close.
Thank you.
Is there a roll call?
Mr. Seidel,
Yes.
Mrs. Noem. Yes. Mrs. Hunt. Yes. Mrs. Beck.
Yes.
Mrs. Fink. Yes. Mr. Bortz.
Aye.
Mr. Umlin.
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes. Next is your comp plan.
Ed,
Yes.
he's got a whole bunch of paper in front of him, guys.
Yes, he does.
Oh,
I love 11 by 17. It's a smile on my face, guys. Absolutely does. Okay.
It's all right. Anyways. Okay.
I'm just gonna grab them.
Okay, we have these things like in an order, so trying to hang on to it in that order for a brief moment, so we can talk through them, and we all know what is where and what I'm talking about.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so again, in short, we're answering questions a lot the other day, and I just kind of wanted to bring closure to some of that so that we could make sure that everybody has some common understanding as we get closer to the month of April, because it'll be here before you know it. So first thing I want you to look at is this. What this is a projected and historical tax levy trail. Now, usually in a lot of districts, like there's equalization aid, and so like you don't necessarily know like if the tax levy is going up, that may be because property values went up, and hence you don't know necessarily that that means more money, because it might just mean that there was less aid that year. In our case, we don't get any aid. We are too property rich in terms of the equalization aid formula. So when you see increases in the levy, you pretty much see increases in spendable dollars. Okay, does that make sense? So again, and just be careful if you had a conversation, for example, with somebody at ABW, because they only have 2 townships that they distribute their levy over, like they get state aid and it is different, and your conversation would look very different with a school district like that. So anyways, all I wanted to highlight on this is the fact that the levy is actually growing. And there's probably just a handful of reasons for that. The biggest one, though, is that when we get impact aid, fluctuations in that, like I mentioned, I think in the past, and it's in the annual meeting booklet and all that good stuff, every time there is a change, we end up getting a recurring revenue limit exemption. And it's basically like passing a super tiny miniature referendum and not having to do a vote for it. Like that's how it figures in there. And I think in the annual meeting booklet, I also gave you a history on that to see how that has impacted Lakeland and how it has probably helped prolong any of our need for referendum, which obviously many schools, if you look at what's on the ballot coming up here on April 2nd, there are lots of schools, obviously beyond just this area. So again, this trend is quite frankly, the notion is ridiculous. Like most districts don't have this story. And I want to draw your attention to that and make sure you understand, and that we all can appreciate the fact that we're in that position to begin with. Okay? So, any questions on it? Again, I'm looking at the trends here. It's not about the detail of the exact number. So now let's kind of tie that into 2 different things. So I want you to go to the next 2 pieces of paper here. The first one you have, I want you to look in the yellow. The yellow shows the 2 different projections. Now remember, I talked to you the other day. I did not go in and change a bunch of other assumptions. I wanted to try to keep all of our assumptions from the other day the same and keep us all in the same comparison as we're going down this process. The only difference between these 2 assumptions is what I estimated that we would receive in terms of the state biennial budgets for allowable increases in the per pupil amounts. Now whether I mean per pupil in the revenue limit or per pupil categorical aid, doesn't matter, don't worry about that, don't get bogged down in it. At the end of the day, it's additional spendable dollars per kid. So one of these has an estimate of $125 a kid.
One of them has an estimate of $250 a kid, okay? And I'm gonna give you both scenarios. I'm gonna estimate that over time, you guys have seen those funding histories as well. I would lean closer towards the 125. But again, it depends who's in office and what all is happening at the time. So let's start with that first one, that's $125. That's the one that was on top first. At the end of the day, when you look at the red numbers, that's where your fund balance is. That shows the decreases in fund balance. The big swing in 2025 for about $3.9 million, that is basically the bleacher project. That's us cutting a check. And again, if there's magical big donations that come in, that just reduces that number, right? So, and that's fine. We can tweak this to reflect that. But I wanted to give you kind of, again, that like worst case scenario, what does that look like? So you again know where you're going. The year after that, again, we don't have this nice trend because of impact aid taking us on this roller coaster. We also have a $330,000 a year student that falls off in FY28. So we have some really interesting odd costs that are making it so our trend looks weird. But at the end of the day, here's what I want you to focus on. I gave you a picture of this, the trend of what's going on here. Again, when you look at what's happening and you look to see, okay, the one on the left talks about the surplus and the deficit. The deficit is decreasing. We're getting closer, again, to a more sustainable place. The next one is your fund balance. The gaps by which it reduces is going down. Most districts don't tell that story, okay? Additionally, we've only plugged in terms of the projects here, or sorry, the estimates, we've not planned for any other reductions or quote-unquote right sizing beyond this 1 year. And there are other steps that probably can be taken as we go down the path via attrition or whatever that are not reflected in here, okay? There's also all kinds of other unknown factors. We don't know what natural gas will be locked in at next. We don't know, you know, just so many different things. So again, yes, it is a projection. It is the best information that we know at this time. The same is true on the other one. This is the $250 per kiddo. Again, at the end of year 5, there's about $1 million difference in the fund balance that you're left with. But the trend is the same. The trend is that the gap is closing and those reductions in fund balance are getting smaller and smaller. Okay? So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea when you say, where are we going in the next 5 years? That is the projection. That was a lot of the questions that we got from various board members across, I would say, everybody in the room. So hopefully that helps you kind of broaden your understanding there. Now let's go to the 11 by 17s. First one.
He was like a kid in a candy store, seriously. We had to load special paper and everything.
Some kids color for fun. I like to just go on Excel and use all different colors. So first off, I'd like you to understand that there's 3 of these. And basically the front page, the first page and the second page are nearly identical. At the top of the page, in blue, you'll see the percentiles. So there were also requests, and we showed 2 different ones, kind of to give like a max and a min and get you the understanding that, yes, with the flick of a number, like we can change this thing. We're trying to, again, propose a system, not an exact set of numbers as of last meeting. We're trying to get to this place where you understand that we can adjust and get to where we need to be. So the first one I gave you is the 46th percentile on the low end. It is the 79th percentile on the top end. Here is why we stopped at those numbers, and you'll look and see that basically I went in 5% increments. Let's start here. And again, don't worry about all the detail on the top. Go to the very bottom to this chart. This chart shows how many different steps people have in various employment groups. So for example, if I am at the bottom there and I'm in the first, where number 1 is on the vertical axis right here, that means I have 1 step left and then I'm topped out. I can't get paid any higher. Okay? That's what that means. As you can see, at the lower percentiles, at 46th and 79th, I'm getting to a place where I've got, about 28, I would say, hourly folks, and I've got about 13 or 14 teachers who are maxed out at the top and or above the top. okay? That's what that means. So for example, if I'm a person making $90,000 a year and the comp plan only goes up to, I'm sorry, this one shows a top of
87.
well, for the mass, yeah, if you're in the far right, otherwise it's about 84 for the regular master's degree. Those folks who are at 90, we'd have to figure out what we're going to do to handle those folks who are outside of the comp plan. It is not uncommon where a district will adopt a comp plan and say, yep, new plan, here's the fence, or here's where we're operating. People outside of the fence, you're gonna do this. You're either frozen until everybody else catches up to you, or we're gonna give you $500 so your check doesn't go down when insurance goes up, or whatever. They will go through some version of a process and make a decision. But again, those individuals are outside of the fence. And when you look at what we called last time, the opportunity that people have in terms of every employment group and what they can be paid, we're setting a new ceiling in place, in this case at the 46th percentile, at a lower dollar amount than what we currently pay at. And that should make sense in terms of how many people are at the end of their respective pay structure and they would not be able to move. That's why you see more of the data bunched up on the left side down here. Okay? Now, open it up, go to the back of the first page. The other piece of information that has been getting asked by both teachers and by some of you as board members is about years of experience, and am I going to be paid for my years of experience, or what does that look like? So the orange line that's on there represents basically where your years of experience would match your level in the comp plan. So if I have 15 years of teaching experience, would I be placed at level 15? As you can see from the blue dots, there are very few, I think there's like maybe 6 dots that are on the line. So of our 68 teachers, I have 6 people who are quote unquote, I guess in the perfect ideal right place. So for those who've been asking, like, well, would I magically get brought up or would you be adjusting? If we did adjust, there's some who would have to go down, there's some who would have to go up. And so the answer to that question has been, don't equate, and this again came up with the committee as well, don't equate the levels of the comp plan directly to years of experience. There have been people who've been hired during the Jim Boucher era, during the Todd Kleinhans era, during the Bob era, et cetera, and the way things were done, and even pre-Act 10, during the Mike Daly era, they were done all kinds of different ways. And so it's difficult to be like, yeah, we're gonna magically put everybody where they are. It's just not possible, or it's not probably a good thing to do, because you're gonna have so much jumbling around. We would not recommend going down that path. But this gives you the picture to understand who is above, who is below, and if someone comes to you and says, well, I'm not paid at my experience rate, yes, we're aware, yes, we understand, but we're also understanding that those levels don't mean years of service. Those levels are more there to show the number of steps it takes to go from the bottom to the top, and how many increments that is. It's not, like I said, for years of experience.
Is this scatter plot our actual employees, or is
These are
this-
actual people at Lakeland Union High School.
Okay.
This is our people. Everything that's on here is our people. Okay, so now that you understand the charts, I'll go back to the front page. Like I said, the first page and the second page literally have the same graphs on them, so you don't have to flip between the two. I literally print them on separate pieces of paper in case you wanted to hold things up one to the next or whatever. What I did on the first page is I wanted to also share with you hourly rates so that you understand. One of the conversations that the comp committee had was, again, understanding what is the incentive for a person to say, hey, I'm an aide, I'd like to become a teacher, or I'm a teacher, I'd like to be the next, assistant principal, the next Hope Cameron, or the next principal, or the next district administrator. So right now, if I am a teacher and I am at the top of the comp plan at 189 days, there is no way that it would make good sense for me financially to go and decide to be the next associate principal. I would take an hourly pay cut. So the boxes that are highlighted in red on here show you those different administrative roles that are paid below the bottom 30th level plain master's degree teacher. Okay? So again, when you look at this plan on the teacher side, first page, that top teacher wage for regular master's degree, the middle column, is $59.26 an hour. Your starting wage for associate principal is $51.57. Okay? Now, I totally understand, and I'm literally giving you this paper so you also understand it yourself. Go to the second page. The top pay for the final stage here of teacher, masters in the middle, $83,995, and pay for the associate principal, starting pay $90,760. Again, that is because right now there are 40 extra days in that associate principal contract. And so again, when I'm sitting here questioning if I'm the person who's like, I'd like to be an associate principal, but why am I going to go work that much more for that much, quote unquote, less of an hourly rate? So again, I want you guys to be aware of that, because that is a conversation that the committee had to understand. For example, why is it that some of the support staff groups, we took what was basically the current range and we didn't expand it? Because again, if I take some of those support staff ones and I increase them too much to make 12 levels, I'm gonna have people getting paid more than a teacher. So we're trying to find those balances and be both cognizant of hourly rates and of those salaried rates. So this document, I think, gives you a good lay of the land in terms of hourlies, salaries. It shows you our people, again, relative to how many steps they'd have less. Now, I do want you to flip. This was the first one that we looked at, is that lowest percentile. Go to the last packet. The last packet has the highest percentile, which is what we were talking about initially at the last meeting. The data looks very different. When you look at the chart at the bottom, again, the amount of movement people have, it's not as clustered down to the left. You'll see the y-axis, the vertical scale only goes to 14, the other one goes to 25, because there's more people down there. Okay? So there's more people, obviously, when you pay at that higher rate, or you open the fence up higher, or give them more opportunity to earn wages, that have more steps to go. Okay? Same thing on the backside. Flip it over. Look at your chart of where people are relative to the orange line. You have much more of a balance of people who are above and below that line. And again, it's because when you open up that fence and you make it bigger, that changes where people's level is going to be placed. We were asked this afternoon when we presented to the staff, how are you placing people? And basically the part of the answer is, well, it depends on which percentile we use, because in order for me to generate 3 of these for you guys, I had to take our people 3 times and place them 3 separate times with different percentiles, because every time I change the percent, I change how much money it is. And we're not going to just fix on the level because that's their experience. We're going to fix it based on kind of knowing that CPI is around $2,000. We're going to try to maybe propose some transition around that number. We talked about a gap payment, et cetera, but it's not about teacher experience and magically equating that. So these are the 3 different versions. Feel free to tear the staples apart, put the ones together that you want to, so you can eye them up like right next to each other. On the right-hand side, all 3 of them, again, I wanted to expand and also give you more of those detailed questions about what does this cost or what does that cost in terms of some of the things that we maybe gave looser details about at the meeting the other night. So the first box, it says annual rollover expense by compensation component. That's right here. It's the first kind of group as you're looking at the top. So that is what we talked about the other night with regards to, all right, we're going to, once we're in the plan, when we go to roll it over, what does that cost us? The portion where everybody's allowed to go down a step, maybe a handful of the teaching staff move to the right or move a lane, that's that $6,800. The other one, the 148, is everybody moving down, and then there's a little bit of FICA, a little bit of WRS that goes with that. So again, we're right around that $175,000, $180,000 mark. And again, I've got all positions in here. Not, I did not exclude the ones that we are considering for reduction. So you will see, if we do reduce positions, you will see a smaller number in terms of the annual expected rollover cost of the plan. Below the black is the purple number. The purple number represents an estimate of what it costs the plan with a 2% CPI. okay? So when you say, Eddie, what do you think it's really gonna be, all things accounted for, I'm looking at about 289 with a proposed, like, roughly, maybe on average, 2% CPI. But the black number and the purple number let you separate the two. Don't add the two. Just know that the purple one is the total once we are on the plan and sailing down the path, if it is approved. Okay? Those numbers do also change. If you look at your packets, when you go back to the 46th and whatever percentile one, since more people are at the end of their comp plan and they have nowhere to go, that number goes down. It shrinks about 20,000 with every 5% reduction in your fence. Again, it's not because like the numbers are necessarily, part of it is that the numbers are lower, but it's partly also due to the fact that people are not going to be able to move. Okay? So you will see differences in the purple number depending on the percentile. The initial cost, let's go to the second box down. So that one, again, is talking about this initial year transition process. How do we get everybody from the current to the new? So we've laid out, again, the placement. I did kind of lay out, so you got administrators, you got teachers. I included separately the pay for performance. We talked about basically last fall, like we're gonna honor that this year because there wasn't anything in place. We didn't know for sure what was gonna happen. So Mr. Massey is still and currently wrapping up with people who are finishing that. Some of them are done. I think we've got 9 or 10 who will hopefully finish. And that dollar amount for the 40 is literally 9 or 10 people times 4,000 apiece. So that has to get figured into that, and we will adjust their placement on their level as best we can to reflect that increase. Lastly, the gap filling, that's like an optional thing we talked about. Again, if we just place people, if Bob's at 50,000 and I'm at 51, and we go place us to the nearest box, which is 52, we had a conversation about whether or not you guys want to include a gap payment. In my one time, yeah, we'd cut the check at the end of this year. We'd cut that check in such a way that it doesn't clear accounts until the last paycheck in August, and we would want to make sure that they are returning. If they resign over the summer, I'd say no dice. We want to honor those folks who are coming back. Again, if you give a resignation in June, I'd say no gap payment for you. That'd be my personal strategy on it. But again, that's up to you guys to kind of decide as a board, and we can cut those checks, like I said, in a way that they're not clear in the bank until August 28th, 30th, whatever. And then we know that we're doing gap payments for people who are actually returning. So that's pretty much your transition cost, and you're looking at, on the one that says the 56th and the 89th percentile, that's around $384,000. The thresholds determining the gap payments are in brown. So if I'm a teacher, that gap payment is based on a $2,341. So again, anybody who's getting less than that gets a gap of whatever $2,341 minus the change to their placement is. So, an hourly staff are about $1,600, again, depending on what their change is. So, the last box, again, that box, that is the one that says additional initial expense requests from surveys and feedback, so on and so forth. Those are all the same, no matter which one of these sheets you're looking at. Some of the things the committee talked about, again, matching contributions for support staff, for teachers, things like that. Those numbers are in yellow. And again, that'd be a contribution to like a 403B. We've got 21% of our staff who are planning for retirement. We brought that up at the meeting today, again, trying to get people to think about that. Unused payout for sick days, that again has been a long, ongoing discussion, I would say, since we got here. There are people who are feeling that when they get these 10 sick days, that when they don't use them, they're losing value. And they're like, I'm not rewarded in any way, shape, or form for being healthy or coming to work when I'm not 100%, and they're saying we want to get some kind of value for that. So we put together a small, it's not perfect, it's not like everyone's getting their daily rate or something like that, but we put together an estimated package of X number of days. Varies by employee groups. We got it listed out on a chart. And the cost that comes from that package, so to speak, is listed on there. It's about 52,000, plus the FICA and the Medicare that go with that. And those, since they are, if they were to be paid out on a regular basis, they would be eligible for WRS. They would be part of people's annual earnings and ultimately their 3 highest years. Okay. Last one on there, there's some questions around the standardizing contracts. Right now we have folks like director people, we have technology, buildings and grounds, food service, things like that that don't have contracts. We'd like to kind of migrate from a letter of intent or a letter of assignment to a version of a contract to kind of outline some of those things more clearly. And as well as, again, revisiting the notion that if I'm currently a whatever, I don't care if I work in the kitchen, I'm a classroom aide, or I'm a custodian, how do I become the next B&G director? How do I become the next food service, the next principal, whatever? And what does that look like so that when we actually go to lay out all those benefits, not only will it be easy for you guys as a board to approve them annually, but if I'm an employee, I also see exactly what the path is and what those perks are to be like, yep, to move to the next layer, this is roughly how that's going to look. It really takes, again, this notion of a system takes out the concept of negotiating. It would help a guy like Bob know when to walk away from someone who is making demands that don't fit our culture, don't fit our expectations, or would disrupt the staff that we already have. Again, we gave that example last year of the tech ed individual with no experience who wanted 65 grand a year. And again, we want great people for our kids, but somewhere too, you got to find the line between turning the place upside down and upsetting people to get somebody and having some version of a system in place that says this is how we do business and this is what's reasonable in our eyes. Chances are that initial dollar amount that they get isn't going to be what keeps them here. It's going to be the relationships, the people who they work with, the feedback they get from people who are evaluating them, how much time they spend with them, and whether or not they feel like they're cared for. Those are probably bigger indicators of whether or not they're going to be successful and stay in the long haul. So that is what I've got that hopefully answers between the emails we sent back. And this gives you something to kind of review, check out, and circle back to. But ultimately, we're kind of back to that conversation about like what does fund balance mean to everybody in terms of a benchmark, and how low are you willing to go, not willing to go, and where does that ultimately take us? Either way, you can see from the projections, we are not bankrupt in 5 years. That is definitely the case. Would we be cash flow borrowing at $3 million? Yes. Yes, we would.
So those, I apologize if we didn't get to everybody's questions. We really, really tried. There was a lot of volume, as there would be when people want to talk about compensation. There's also a lot of questions about what's it mean to me, what's it mean to me. Well, those are questions we really can't answer until we decide on what system or what levels we want to set as a board. When you talk about budgetary impact, and there are several levers you can pull, and one of those is, well, when we go into closed session, is what we'll talk about, as far as staffing is concerned. But when you have a path, and it is a clear defined path, and you have sole control over that path as a board on what to, when to add CPI, not add CPI, when to, if we're having a rough year, when to freeze, not freeze, and having it right in front of you and saying, look, this is where we're going, and you guys knowing this is what it means if we freeze. And it's not like some random number. It's all there, and you can see where it goes. Is a very powerful thing forward. One of the things we have to get more clear about as a team is what the accountability piece looks forward with that. Now, I have done that personally with an admin. If you don't have a successful evaluation, I froze you. You guys are part of those discussions, okay? That is also part of this. Okay, so part of this is the work we're honoring, the work we're already doing, honoring the good work that's being done by people as well, and not creating those situations where I'm looking at A and say, why the hell are you paying Eddie more? He's a 1, and I'm a 3. What are we? Those kinds of things people know. We want to clearly define that and have this path for people so people can have an understanding of a way to move forward. And it's not all clearly defined right now, because the big thing is for us is to have a parameter to work with. Remember when we talked about board up here, 30,000 feet, give parameters. How do we get to what you guys want us to have within the parameters you set? Now, if you give us the parameters, we will go to the next phase and get really articulate in the detail of what all those accountability pieces mean and what it takes to move forward and where everybody else is classified. Just want you to know that's what we're trying to do. 30,000, 10,000, 5,000 trench. And I think that is important to have that bigger understanding.
Heidi?
Okay, so if of the 9 or 10 people doing the pay for performance, do they get the pay for performance plus?
Yeah, they would be placed in accordance with their paper performance.
Okay.
Because they made it through the 4-year stretch.
So if we're aiming to give everybody about $2,000, those individuals will see 6.
Okay. And the brown boxes that are on here, is that what you're saying is everybody will be at that rate?
The brown box represents basically the biggest increase that someone would see given like placement. And so that's what's going to be used as the benchmark to determine the gap payment if it is the case that the board decides to do that.
So not everybody gets the same raise. If you have somebody underperforming,
They would be placed and sat there. Yeah.
For right now, like we still have to calibrate exactly what
that would look like,
underperforming means. Like one of the things that you guys saw was like a successful evaluation is like a 2.5, a 2.75, or 3.0. Like we still have to calibrate that. So like when these guys are done at the end of the year, I'd pull all that data and I'd look and say, okay, these people have this much experience. You know, here's our 0 to 2 experienced people. Here's our 3 to 5, 3 to 6, whatever. And then here's, you know, people who've been around the block and should know how this works. And we can kind of look at what those scores look like, and that can help set us into, yep, these are reasonable numbers for what that looks like going forward. But that's going to be a work in progress. And like I said, Randy is a good example of like somebody who's been doing an eval. He it's not going to be a lot for him, and on top of that, he's only got 5 people, but he already has defined, I think, what good looks like. So it won't be hard for him to do that. Special ed, I believe, like we don't have evals for those folks yet. So like not only are we gonna have to make the tool, but it very well may be the end of next year for some of those support staff that we're still defining what a quote unquote successful eval is. Now, I think there's some obvious things that like stick out when, you know, like, or that you would define as not successful. Someone who repeatedly doesn't show up to work on time, somebody who uses inappropriate language, like, I don't think we need to sit down and have a long conversation to figure out that that's not okay. But some of the more detailed things around what does supporting a student positively look like, and what's the best version of that, what's a good version of that, what's an okay version, and what's an unacceptable, that still has to get ironed out. But again, like that work will take time. It's not like that.
Okay. Barry?
So, you got this all slated for FY24. So my question is this, is what you're proposing for 25, that this movement that's created by this model is going to be the actual change in compensation, or are you going to be expecting that we pay the $500,000 in the one model basically for movement and CPI and then do something more in 25?
So there's 2 years.
Tell me how that works.
There's 2 years going on. The gap payment. So when you're looking at this sheet or any one of these sheets, and you
So the
look,
gap payment's going to get applied to people retroactive back to this year?
we are gonna, if you guys approve this as something you want to do again, if you guys are like, we're not super worried that everybody gets the exact same dollar amount. It can come off the table. But if we do that, we'll do it in such a way that it shows up on June 30th, 2024 books, but it won't hit the bank until like August 30th or whenever that last payroll is. For a number of those folks, that may be a little trickier to do for the support staff because I don't hold those checks. So we may have to issue those like in a timely fashion if somebody leaves, such is life. But anyways, that would be an FY24 payment. So when you're looking at that magic number of 507, 80 of that roughly, 86,371 is actually going to be in this year's budget.
In this year's budget, but how does it, in other words, we approved contract pay increases and everything for last year that people are living this year.
Yeah, this would be like approving a separate stipend for those people. We bring you a list of the
In addition
names.
to what we've already done.
Yes.
So a bonus.
Yes, yes, if you wanna call it that, either way, whatever you wanna call it, it's one-time money. I've been calling it the gap, you can call it a bonus, whatever, it's one time, it's not. Like, back to that example, when we're talking about the contract values of what was this year and what was next year, my contract in my example before with Bob, his was 50 grand, mine was 51, so on and so forth. Ours both will be 52 next year. But that extra 1,000 I get this year, because I was not getting a full 2,000 increase, I'm getting that 1,000 this year as like a bonus.
I understand, and now I understand what you're trying to do, but, so here's another question for you, and this is kind of a philosophical one, but, you know, in trying to keep things 50,000 foot and trying to work with the bigger numbers and not get into the detail of who gets exactly what you've done is you've gone through all this work that leads us basically to a bottom line of whatever, say, in the 59th percentile of the high planet was a total of $500,000. To me, and this is my business background coming, typically what's done in organizations, and we've done it here in the past too to some extent, is we determine what the pool of funds available is, and then we work it back into the organization. And it seems to me that if the board wanted to pick a number in between the 500,000 or whatever, that you can work this model both ways. In other words, we could say, okay, because we feel that the gap is this, we don't necessarily want to go, or the gap fills a large portion of what we would feel comfortable giving for increases, blah, 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 blah. And so, but in the next fiscal year, we aren't comfortable with spending $500,000. We only want to spend $300,000. And don't ask me how we come to those numbers. I'm just saying you could work that backwards into this conflict.
Yeah, we could back into a number. It can function in that way.
And then that would generate where you're at with your percentiles. And I guess what I'm trying to say is then in future, when we're not doing all the transition costs and so on and so forth, we can work on achieving those higher percentiles if that's the goal of the organization. Did people follow what I'm saying?
I did. And ultimately, if we have the cuts that you're about to propose, then that would pay for the funding of LUHS.
Initially,
But that would be long term.
and nothing for the long term.
Right. Can I ask a couple questions?
Yeah.
Well, I have a couple. What do we do with the outliers where experience doesn't match pay? Because I feel like they're getting paid more. If you look at your line of best fit, we have some major outliers on that line of best fit. So what are we doing to accommodate for that? And that's really ultimately a you guys thing, because that's the weeds that we shouldn't get into. But the one thing that I do think is important is if we use this linear formula, which you actually had in your PowerPoint presentation last time, the whole 89 pages of differing people, there was a formula that was listed within that line of best fit. And I feel like we are, if you look at the people that are in the levels that they cannot move anymore, they are typically the people who have been here the longest, at least in your spreadsheet here, or your scatter plot here. It's the teachers that have been here the longest. So ultimately what we're saying is, if you've been here the longest, you are at a level that you are not going to move at. And I'm not sure that that's where we want to go, where we have the most experienced people, the people that are giving the most to the school and have given the most to the school, to say, I'm sorry, you're done. Where I would feel like, how much longer are these people going? And if you look at the linear formula that you had on these, it's like $564 per year, adding to, some of these things. I mean, you literally had the formula in these scatter plots listed.
Yeah. Oh, yes, you're talking, sorry. I know what you're talking about now. Sorry, light bulb. Okay, do you guys know what you're talking about?
No.
Okay, so on the scatter plots that are in the PowerPoint that has like 88 slides, I included the equation that's in there, the line of best fit.
The linear equation.
That shows basically the growth in theory of what is happening with the different groups. So yes, it is. It's in there. That linear model is there just, I guess, for fun. It and it is something I looked at initially. It's not something that in the end ended up driving what got us to where we are. The other thing I think, to just, again, kind of revisit those OPEB benefits, you guys have to understand that a lot of those folks who are at the end of that finish line have up to $125,000 or so that is part of that old OPEB promise that we will owe those folks walking out the door. And I still have people on that list who I'm paying today who were here when I was a student. So I don't want, or I guess I want to make sure that you understand that anybody who's hearing from one of those staff members, yes, there is a six-figure potential dollar amount waiting for them at the finish line that all the people who likely have cell movement opportunity do not have. So just make sure you understand that, and by all means, like, to fix that problem, it's simple. You just pay at a higher percentile. That's all it takes, and you can pay those people more. So, yes, and it's not that we don't value the people who've been at the end of the finish line.
But
It's
there
just-
has to be a ceiling, guys. You can't have this gap keep going like this.
Correct.
It's just not sustainable when you're throwing percentages at it. And again, I'm with it. You know, I'd love to have the problem where everybody's at the top because they're that good. Okay, but we have this weird conundrum. There are not 300 applicants for positions, and market has driven some of our prices way above that line. You know, when it comes to line of best fit, there's people who are, okay, I don't have the experience, but I'm above the line when it comes to wages, you know, and that's where we've had to go to get some people to fill positions. So that's why we really tried to give, when you talk 30 steps, that's a career.
I know, I just,
You know, I mean, that's-
I struggle with having several people way above that line of best fit, but people who have given their all to this community for years are at that same level and can't move on.
Be very careful with the verbiage that they sell that on. Again, they walk away
Oh.
pretty well. You know, our job here is, and I hear you, and there's some of my favorite people at the top of that list, but at the end of the day, they're not, they have benefits others don't. And that is you guys have been very kind as a district to that way moving forward. I'm not trying to tick off anybody by saying any of these things, but we have to be realistic. You guys say, Bob, be accountable, provide me with a budget. Okay, provide you with a budget, provide you with cuts. None of the people on this cut list are at the very tippy top of the scale, okay? Maybe one. But you know, at the end of the day, you're looking at teaching positions as a wide variance, which is why we tried to go to 30 steps, because when you get to the top, if you compress it to 14 steps, the top is going to say the same thing. When you get to the top, like, I don't get any more money over there. I just show up and you give me what you give me. And I've heard these arguments for 20 years, on both sides of the table, actually. But I do think it's important to realize you cannot let the top run away. And we have to keep competitive at the bottom, because there are way fewer people with 30 years of experience than there are coming into our profession right now. So we have to we have to balance that with being able to attract in that, you know, 0 to 7 year window.
Ultimately, I think I go back to what Barry was saying, is that we would have given you a CPI increase, and last year it was right around $360,000, I think, that we allowed for that.
Well, last year we gave 4 1/4. That was in the slideshow that I shared with you guys. That's what
I
was.
went back to last year's slideshow, but it could have been, I went back to
That's okay.
last year's slideshow and looked at the amount that you requested. Now, I'm not sure if that's what you paid out, but that was what was
Well,
requested.
and that's part of the history too, like, some of you had asked for that data of like, what happened every year. The changes in the amount of personnel make it so that I can't just run an accounting report. I can't run something that nice and clean. On top of that, I am nervous about where things were placed in accounts beyond the time I was here either. So, like, I can confidently tell you right now, if I want to find, you know, what do we do for, what's the growth or the change in administrator pay? Our accounting is literally doing those separate. I can pull a 111 object code and I can tell you what that looks like. I can pull a 112 for teachers. I can pull a 115 for custodians. That was not happening before. So I don't have a way. But even on top of that, again, if I pull those codes now, it doesn't account for the number of personnel that are physically on the roster. And sometimes that changes. Sometimes there was FMLA. Sometimes there's mid-year
Then those years, it
departures.
looks like you paid higher because you're paying short-term stuff as well, so.
Correct. It's not easy to track it, but that was the number that was proposed, and so that's what I tried to compare it with, because that's what we're proposing.
So it was 3% was our pay increase last year? If
We did 5.1% of the average teacher wage.
Right.
And then we
okay.
used a sliding scale, so some people got as high, I believe, as, it was a 12 or 16, I'm sorry, and like as small as 3 or 1.
3.5.
The way.
Something, I forget, I can go pull it, but there was big change, or big differences in the percents and the dollars.
So let's say, for example, we did a 4% CPI.
Yep.
Okay. And with your 56th and 89th percentile, without the bottom box, the purple, it's 383, 800,000. Okay. If we just did a 4% CPI across the board, based, again, this is based upon who we have this year, and that was based upon who, you know, the 4% based upon who we have this year. What would that be? What would that increase be? That was one of my questions, and you said it was kind of hard for you to figure. I just want to see, if we did a 4% CPI and doing this model, all the increases are paying increased by $50,000, now I'm not too worried. But if it's actually increasing it by almost $400,000, now I'm a little worried.
So just to give you a rough idea, lowest teacher proposed wage next year is 50,000. So roughly it's 4.12, but 4% of 50,000 is $2,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we are not, like, when I'm placing people on there right now, I'm, like I said, kind of sort of trying to aim between the gap payment and the placement payment,
right,
to total up to that.
But what's our total payroll?
Like on,
Just salary?
oh, I don't know. I see the total numbers right now. Like, I mean, I pull it, but
Because if I would multiply that times 4%,
Right, that's what, I get what you're getting at, so basically you're saying, if we had not done this package and did a 4% across the board, or weighted, whatever it was, whatever that total amount is, we'll equal that same amount here.
Right.
And then it doesn't pay the digger, then you guys are in charge of, do the plan.
Right, and that's the comment, or I guess that's the point that I was trying to make at the beginning. You know, I think a comp plan is very valid. I think there's a lot of work and a lot of structure and a lot of logic to it. I really do. And I think the question is, do we fund it from the bottom up the way you guys have done, or do we fund it from the top down? And what's been explained to me is that by both you, Bob, and Eddie, is that it's a system, it's a formula. And if that's the case, then you can start with the end result and work the formula backwards. So I guess what I'm trying to say is to Sean's point, this rollover, everything's gonna cost us $600,000, and a 4% CPI is $605,000. There's nothing to really argue about. But if those numbers are drastically different, then I guess we need to understand that.
So ultimately, working backwards, we could just go to the 4% and say, you work it into that plan.
Except
based on
that I wouldn't call it all CPI, because I think you need to know what you're gonna designate as CPI and what you're gonna designate as based on the economy. But the point being that once, it makes us appear, I don't know, to me, more fiscally responsible because we're working within our means from a pool standpoint. And then the comp plan's up to you guys. You just do whatever you want. And that's the way it works in industry. The board gives the CEO a pool of money and says, here you go, make the organization work. So as long as the pool is adequate, and I understand that there's a line of definition there.
that. And that's also taking into account that we're assuming then you're going to make fiscally responsible decisions. You know, if you feel like teachers, one way or the other, you're going to make that decision to fall within this plan.
So where are we going?
so at the end of the day, if I take a percentage of Fund 27, 10, 27, 29, and 50 expenses, and I say what's 4% of the salaries and hourly wages going out the door in those different funds, you're saying that you're good within 4% of that, whatever 4% of those total salaries is.
I'm just using it as an example. I don't know what the percentage should be. That's something the board has to discuss and decide. But I'm just, you know.
It wouldn't always be 4%. I mean, we would make that decision on an annual basis.
Oh, for sure, I'm using 4 as an example, because that's this
to
year's work
start our
number.
process.
It's
Yes.
4.12.
Right.
And if you said, well, that's what we're gonna use as the basis, then I can get you that number. And again, I want you guys to understand that we're not, last year or this year, or for any of the recent years for the most part, we're not seeing those increases in terms of CPI. That's not what's rolling through the school funding formula. Which again, is fine, I can do that calculation for you and tell you what that dollar amount is. It's probably gonna be fairly close to about 400 or so. And when you take the 507 number and you pull 80 grand out of it, or whether you just don't make that gap evening payment, 426-ish or 420 is gonna be pretty close to what that number is. We're gonna be pretty darn close, 4% of that.
Well, the difference
Number.
being that you would apply it, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't, again, the board has to decide, but in my mind, I wouldn't be, this year's paid for. I'm talking about moving forward for next year. If that gap payment is part of that total compensation plan for next year, then that's the way it should be. I don't think we should, my personal opinion is I don't think we should be paying backwards for a gap. If we're gonna move forward with a compensation plan, then everything should go into effect for fiscal year '25. That's my opinion.
Okay,
But
even if I have
again,
unused
that's
funds for
decision
this
that-
year.
What's that?
Even if I have unused funds for this year.
Yes, because we've already negotiated and paid for fiscal year '24, in my mind.
Yes.
Okay?
Mhm.
So I'm talking about moving forward fiscal year '25. If the gap payments to be part of that total compensation, then bring it. And
Okay.
does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And then we have control over the cap.
Right.
And it still gives us a 50,000 foot level in terms of an overall budget, and it may have to be adjusted, and gets us out of this and lets you guys manage this.
That.
I agree.
Well, okay, if we have 4% this year, and next year we introduce this plan, okay, and CPI is 2.
On this plan, right, but
Or
it
not.
would be added.
Or not, or not.
But it would
Or
be
not.
added to the 4% because the
No, no,
CPI is
yeah.
in here and the adjustment, right.
So if that's the case, Gary, then we say as a board, okay, look, you know, the industry says our local climate, or whatever people use to decide what a fair pay rate should be, is 4.5%, the CPI is 1.6, then we have them build 4.5% into the plan, and the part of it that's not CPI gets built into the steps and lanes as an increase across the board. It's just working the numbers backwards, rather than saying, the increase in CPI was 1.2%, and the cost for this is whatever, we're gonna increment pay by 4%.
And it avoids the presentation of 386 to 507 and then stipends of additional $500,000.
Right, it says we started with this much money and
Right.
we dispersed it accordingly throughout
Correct.
the matrix.
But it's using your model, and your.
Right, no, I understand what you're
Yeah,
saying.
right.
But
But
I
it's
would
still
also
putting the good work that you did in play.
But I would also say not to exceed, at the very least, whatever's listed here on the 89th percentile. I mean, you know.
Right, we'll be able to cap that.
Correct.
Right, we'll be able to cap that amount.
Correct. I mean,
And then I
if you
think we
went
need to talk about stipends and additional monies that are being paid out as well, because we all saw that.
We're way ahead of ourselves, I'm just talking about what's here, not stipends and everything else.
Yes, okay, so, what does the board want to do? A very clear sentence so that it's understood and that everybody understands exactly what's expected.
Maybe you can correct me, but the board would approve the compensation plan that would fall within or under what would have typically been the 4% CPI increase.
The CPI for
For
2025.
2025.
Okay, that only answers one part of the question.
Right,
Right,
it gives
we
us a
need to have that
direction.
number.
I can get that number probably in a matter of minutes. Just as an
No, you're
example, so we're all on the same page, and I just, again, I wanna make sure the committee understands, everybody understands. So in a year of, from what I'm gathering, it sounds like you want this concept to apply going forward as well. Am I hearing that, or am I not
You are.
Yes.
So
Yes,
just,
but there's two pieces to it, right?
there is, and I guess that's my question. So if there's a year where it's like 0, which didn't happen long ago, it was like 0.12%, which is literally 0.0012, then perspective. Does that mean that there's no money available at all, or is that just the CPI portion?
Just
That's just the CPI.
CPI. Like the
Okay.
lanes
Sorry,
would be
there's
the
only so much
same, but the
pizza.
CPI increase would be board approved every year.
Okay. And
Those are variable.
I don't even, just so you guys understand too, like I don't even want to have you make that promise either tonight. So like if somebody calls you or you start talking to somebody, like I said, next year if we don't get another year of no snow, like I don't think we're going to be in an environment, even if CPI is whatever, where it's like easy to justify that. So again, I am hearing you. I think we're good, and I can make like that math.
Well, would it be okay, are you guys comfortable approving the plan?
No.
And just wait till we get the numbers first? Okay.
Yes.
And one thing I would say is, I'm not against paying out for, sick days, PTO. But since we contribute to the Wisconsin retirement system, I don't know if we feel obligated to give everyone a matching $500 for 403B. So.
Now, it ties to count, but that's not this plan.
The committee definitely.
That's part of the 500,000.
Right.
It is. I do want you guys to understand that the committee had other values besides just wages. So I would almost venture to say, like, if the path you want to go down nixes everything that's in yellow, there may be a conversation warranted with those folks to say, like, if we were to do a lower percentile, would you have a preference to some of those other benefits? Like a match contribution. Again, that conversation was broad, and there was more than just what's in my paycheck to it. And I'll be honest, some of those things in yellow are more efficiently paid than straight wages. So things like 403B contributions have no FICA, no Medicare. It saves us money. It's a form of compensation. And if it's valued by the staff, I would think to some level, like you have like finding a balance, right? But like to some level, I would think that's a practice you'd want to engage in because it gets people saving for retirement. As one of the biggest employers in a community for a lot of schools, if you're turning retirees out that haven't planned for retirement, that does affect local businesses. It affects how many people go out to eat and how many people, do stuff that spends money in the community. So.
Okay, so we,
Can
do
I
they
ask
have direction?
one little
Sure.
question? Only because, Eddie, you just said this. So basically what you're saying is we would approve this for 25, but that we would have the option as a board, I don't know, to freeze level movement or CPI.
You can freeze either one or both. Like that's
On
how
an
it-
annual basis.
On an annual basis. So again,
That's
I
what you're
just.
saying would benefit us so that there's no anticipation necessarily?
Yep.
It's just gonna be, okay, that I can see.
I don't want anybody to make promises of anything because you
Correct.
just don't know what's going to happen.
Okay.
And there's so many variables. We'll do the best we can. We've told people that.
So let me put my administrator brain here. What I'm hearing you want us to see is you want to see where the 4% would be, how much that pool of money is that in apples to apples versus the comp plan, or is it matched to comp, whatever. You'd like to see those numbers come back to you, that you can make a more astute and accurate decision moving forward for the actual compensation moving into next year. Is that what I'm hearing?
Correct.
Okay, that's what we'll do. We'll bring it back to you next month.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to.
Thanks, Eddie, for all your work too.
Yes.
That's a lot of work.
Yes.
Yes, I think we're in a pretty good clear spot.
Discussion about changes to teacher contract.
So Eddie and I have had the kick at this cat for quite some time, and we sit and we go through contracts and we try and make it both more streamlined, more understandable, and much more uniform, so you don't have variation between teacher contracts, to avoid certain things to avoid certain things that people say, well, that wasn't in my letter or my contract. So this is just a way, and the suggestions, you could tell probably by the verbiage of which one of us was the driving force behind the changes. But generally, this is what we had agreed upon after, beating it to pieces several times for the teaching contract. It is not earth-shattering by any stretch of the imagination. It's just a standardized document that we know we can rely on, that is compliant with current statutes and something that we can easily move forward with.
Any questions on it?
Yes.
What are some grammatical errors, do you know?
Well, yeah, that part we know.
This document still would need to be seen by a TOLS. This is like,
Right, we have to run it through.
this is a draft, but the concepts are there for you.
So the gist of it is there, but there are a lot of.
There are things that are like needing to be finalized, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So this is an FYI.
Yeah, we would love to, with your permission, run it through the lawyer, given the fact we're trying to be cost conscious there as well.
Sure.
If you're okay with us moving this to the next level, we would like to do so.
Everybody okay with that?
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
Okay, good enough. Next. Did we already do the 5-year cash flow that you talked about?
We've been hitting up some 5-year, whole lot of things. So, I think we're good, and you do get cash flow every month. I think we're good there unless somebody wants me to hunt something down.
Okay, we're good, looks like it. Let's go on the board committee reports, liaison reports, charter school.
Charter school's there in front of you. They had their open house. They have some, they have 6 new students that they're going to be looking at, mostly at the grade school level, 2 at the high school level, and talked about numbers that are currently 4th grade, going into 5th grade, so 2028 is an influx.
Not next year, but the year after.
Yeah, right. 2028 to the high school level is going to be a very large influx in IEP students that the LAC has already been talking about for their notes, and everything else is right there in front of you. Is there anything to add?
No, the consortium is meeting April 3rd.
Yeah.
Okay. Questions? Thank you. Consent agenda items. Anybody wants to remove anything? Yes.
I need to all track and field related.
You just want to,
All track and field related, and I have 2 quick questions about, I'll skip that, I'll ask it another time. All track and field,
are they on here?
Yeah.
Why don't we just pull the overnight trips totally?
Yeah.
Just pull the overnight trips and that'll cover that.
Yeah.
Item C.
Good. And you can maybe abstain on.
I would
if you
have
want
to abstain.
Okay. So are we good then with consent agenda items A and B? If so,
So
I'd entertain a motion. Thank you.
Do we need a second?
Yeah.
Roll call?
Mrs. Knoll? Yes. Mrs. Hunt? Yes. Mrs. Peck?
Yeah.
Mrs. Fink? Yes. Mr. Bork?
Aye.
Mr. Umland?
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll?
Yes.
Mr. Seidel?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yep. Okay, overnight trips is, what do you want to talk about?
Yes, I want to talk about the golf.
Okay.
Is that golf a meet or a practice?
I'm sorry, you don't.
The golf trip, is it a meet or a practice? It's not a meet.
It's neither. It is literally a trip that they are going into golf in Georgia.
Well, it has to be, if they're not competing against another school, then it's, because it was established as a meet.
I don't know.
That's what it says right here, it says meet.
Oh.
So that would mean that they would be playing against another team. Otherwise, if they're doing it as
I
a.
don't know if they're playing against.
I don't know if we could put it on the agenda. Yeah.
So, and then, otherwise it would be considered a practice. Because right now they're in golf season, which starts.
Yes.
And they couldn't.
Then I guess we'd call it a practice.
Yes.
I think it's technically a varsity practice.
Are they playing? Are
I
they-
think it's technically a varsity practice.
Right, and that's okay, as long as it's a practice, because otherwise if it's a meet, it's gonna count against one of the
They're allowed to
15.
meet, yes.
Right. No,
And
it's not a
and
meet.
knowing Scott, he likes to book up
Mhm.
all 15 meets.
No, it's not a meet. I
So-
think it's
So we'll list it
technically
as a
varsity.
practice.
Right, that was my concern.
Okay, anything else?
Um,
And
The campus tours, the Haskell University and Michigan State University, my only question is, why were those two universities chosen? I just was curious as to what that campus tour involved. Does anybody? Just.
The Haskell tour was chosen because it was, it's partially paid through Lecta Flambeau. So it's the second of two trips that, what's Leo's dad's name? Terry Poitra and Erica Hartzheim are doing with a small group of kids.
Okay.
But part of the funding comes from the Education Center.
Okay.
I do not know why Michigan State.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
And that's a tour we pay for? Excuse me?
No, sorry, it came out half.
Okay.
So I need to pull that.
Then I have just another question, then talking about paying for, is our school going to be paying for any of that golf experience, or is that coming out of their club account? Okay.
That is all cool. I just had, due to the late nature of this thing, had a conversation with Matt Cook the other day, and Scott Howard will be coming in to pick up his credit card, which he hadn't done yet, and making sure that basically they're gonna send me a list of expenses that they plan to be reimbursed for. We made sure that they are gonna have parents who are background checked, made sure that people are getting permission slips, because one of the things that Emily and I and Bob have talked about a little bit is getting some of these folks in along with their boosters, and having some more communication around what the process expectations are, and how things need to be done for both student safety and practicality. Like I told Matt when I talked to him yesterday, I said I don't want to reimburse like 12 different people for 32 different $5 expenses. Like, I want to make sure that, you take a credit card with you, use it appropriately. Trying to get out of the business of reimbursing all kinds of people who go off, do what they want to do, and ask for forgiveness later. We had somebody put a $7,200 batting cage on their personal credit card last year. We've had all kinds of
The big
interesting
thing is
things.
systemizing everything.
Yes.
It's our standard model.
It's a process, and we have to have those meetings to start that dialogue, and that'll be good.
Heidi, do you have a question?
I think we need to review policy 2340, because the athletic extracurricular overnight trips are included in this policy, and actually says that these are classified overnight travel to be approved by the principal in accordance with all the overnight travel guidelines. That it's listed as you doing this.
No, the board requested to approve all overnight trips, right?
No, I'm going by what's written in the
Okay.
policy, and it says that all of these are listed as an overnight trip, approved by the principal with the guidelines that are written
So you
in this policy.
Yeah, the policy needs to
We
be
need to
updated.
update this policy, because the athletic director is not involved at all in this policy. It's all done by Levi with guidelines that then get approved by you and then are brought to the board. We really need to look at
And
this
there's student
because
waivers, yeah.
back in '22, we also, or in December of '21, we also put a motion in that every one of these trips that are taken out of district have to include travel insurance. That's not in here. And there's a big confusion and nothing got updated.
Okay, can we put that in policy?
I got it.
Agenda, got it, okay.
I did have a quick conversation with our carriers today. We should be good to go. I was nervous about some of the multi-state issues. We should be fine. The only scenario where we'd have major issues potentially is if there's some version of like major negligence. So like if you, for example, had a coach go places with students and they decided to have a beer.
that would be problematic. But again, like when we're not negligent, like there is reasonable coverage, there is not need to purchase all kinds of additional coverage. I did also have a conversation with Frau today about like the German trip, for example. The only thing they are really gonna get there is more around some minor additional coverages, but particularly like if something happens and they can't go, it's more of like insurance
Travel
coverage.
insurance?
Yeah, it's more like travel insurance. There are some additional little perks on it, but again, by and large, that insurance is not gonna be the primary responder to a fatality or
Liable, any kind
Yeah.
of.
some other major
And-
issue, yeah.
And we have waivers, we have the waiver that's requested by the policy that's signed by all of them and their parents, I would assume, correct?
The waiver, like the insurance, in the eyes of the insurance company today, the waivers, yeah, in the eyes of the insurance company today, the waivers aren't worth the paper they're written on.
Okay.
And so like, not that we can't, but they did say we should have clear, like permission slips, like when people bring something to Mr. Massey, again, I don't care if they're going to Atlanta to golf or if they're going down the road to Lander, it should say, the kids are going here and this is what they're doing and whatever. So
And you
that-
have parental consent.
Correct, that parents understand that more than anything. So as long as we're doing that, we should be in a reasonable place.
Okay.
Question, Lisa?
Oh, no, I guess I was only gonna say that they've already delineated with the parents how much, what the school is paying for, and the remainder the parents have agreed to pay for. So I don't think that there's an issue as to what's being paid or not being paid. Like the $5 here and there, all of that.
I think it's a great opportunity for those kids, that's awesome.
Okay, so I entertain a motion to approve the golf practice trip.
So moved.
Second.
I'm sorry.
There's
Yes.
several.
Okay.
Oh, you're not gonna do them, you're gonna do them individually?
If you wanted,
Because we have some
just
issues
end
that
it closed.
Got it. Sorry.
Roll call.
I'm sorry, who's first and second?
Ms. Neo's first.
Sean was second.
Mrs. Hunt? Please, I'm sorry, do I need to let you know?
This is for golf.
This is.
for golf.
I'm so sorry. Yes. Mrs. Peck?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink? Yes. Mr. Bort?
Aye.
Mr. Umlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll?
Yes.
Mr. Seidel?
Yes.
Mrs. Noem? Mr. Smith?
Yes. Now, I seek approval, a motion to approve the school, I don't know what's called, what's it called?
Campus tours.
Campus tours.
Only
Or just the clubs, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's under
We
club.
were and the track and field together since you're one, two.
There's one campus tour I have to abstain in track and field.
Right. Which campus tour?
The Haskell University.
But both groups of students and both teachers are going to each, Michigan and Haskell. Correct? Same group?
I don't know.
I don't
So
know.
it's just
No.
two-
I don't think so.
I do not think that's correct.
Okay.
I do not.
Okay.
No.
Just
Can
asking.
you just lump
All right.
them all together and have Ann abstain from
Yeah.
all of them?
Yeah.
To make this easier?
Yeah.
Fine with me,
Sure.
let's go.
Wouldn't that be easier?
I'd entertain a motion to approve the campus trips.
And
And
all
let's-
others.
and all
And all other
Overnight trip requests.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Mrs. Pack?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Mr. Bort?
Aye.
Mr. Umlin?
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll?
Yes.
Mr. Seidel?
Yes.
Mrs. Noem?
Yes.
Mrs. Hunt? Abstain. Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Thank you for playing for this one.
Strike one.
Director of Pupil Services.
That's me. It's only like, 70 slides long, so you
Thank
guys will
you.
get to close by like 9:30, 10 o'clock. All
All
right,
right.
all right. It's only 4 slides. So, already done with one. This was our, these are our numbers for this year. When looking at students at Lakeland, there are some students included in here, some star students that attend Lakeland for some of their classes. So we do have that. All I wanted to show you was our numbers this year and then compare it to our numbers next year. So we have We have about 22 students in here that will be graduating. Some of those students would not be graduating because they are 21-year-old students, so some of them will move down, and some of these will age out. So we have quite a few things happening. You'll see this number. If we're getting rid of 22, we are getting 28 in students with disabilities. So we have a big number coming from the elementary, middle schools. But you will also see that this number will rise because of the aging from 18 to 21. So those are our numbers. Our students with 504s are going to somehow stay exactly the same. So I just wanted to give you numbers, and that is literally all I have.
Questions?
Thanks, Jen.
Jen knew what was going to be on the agenda.
Thank you.
I knew how long it was gonna be, so.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
School year?
Nope, we're all done.
Well done. You're on.
Okay, I'll give you the short version, as you don't have this in front of you, because I have the short version in front of me. Had a meeting with the bus company. One of the other parts of our budgetary process is re-looking at contracts that we currently have that we may or may not agree with some of our costs. We are able to find monthly credits back by sharing routes, so that's a good thing. We're trying to continue on with those kinds of processes. Any other major contracts, we're going to continue to do so. We happen to have a groundbreaking, oldest day of the week, but we had the groundbreaking for our new project that is up and running. It was nice because Trevor came and took all the pictures with everybody's phone. It was fantastic. They actually took dirt from someplace else, so it wasn't frozen dirt, and it was still frozen, so it was good. And a thank you to the board members that could make it, and I understand it was a weird time of day and everything, but they were ready to cut that thing to pieces, so we weren't going to stand in their way. So there will be some, if you haven't seen the picture, I can make sure that gets circulated. I had the I'm going to P for P follow-up meetings. I have the honor of, after you guys go through the whole process, of meeting with the individuals and saying, tell me about your project, and then making them jump through one more hoop so I know what's going on and what we're paying for. Those have been going very well. I had the distinct pleasure of sitting through an IRA Facilities Funding Grant webinar. Basically, it's green funding. If we have projects that would fall under that area, there's grant monies available as we move forward. It's an ongoing process. There is no limit on the dollars of what you could put on it, but they have very specific things that you have to apply for.
So if we used our solar panels to power the stadium complex lights, would that work?
Don't ask details, John. And there's a lot there.
Just trying to be creative.
But no, it is things like that. I don't know if it's existing projects that you have currently. I think it's all new projects if you're doing efficiency projects and anything of that nature. So the LED lights for the parking lot might be one of those things that cross in there. So that was worth sitting through the.
That's a good idea, that kind of solar stuff, sitting to do those, yeah.
I'm with you, but, so, Jose has been merciless on trying to get us a vendor that helps us, and a platform that helps us deliver our social media method more effectively, more real-time, more vibrant. The situation goes on. We're trying to get it to where we have appropriate amount of people signed up, the right platform, everything smooth at the end. There's about 2 or 3 meetings we've had already in regards to that, and also trying to mitigate costs around that as well. Continue to go and find our students that need a little extra help through our discipline process, and making sure they're doing what they need to get back on their feet educationally. Those are going well. Not everybody's getting the news they want to hear, but they're at least in contact with. So, budget, we talked about that enough tonight. Pre-con meetings and now construction meetings for the complex. You would think bleachers in a building wouldn't be something that would require a lot of different people in the room, but I was wrong. There's a lot of people in the room, and we're working through timelines right now Obviously, it was nice to see them get on campus as early as they did to get the demolition of part of it done. Obviously, weather is good, depending on the next phases. As it gets moving, I'm trying to get the link to the motion capture camera that is watching the whole project. So it's up and running as part of one of those things people can see the project go down and the project be built back up. So that would be one of those things that we could really leverage moving forward. For those who've had the pleasure of doing Title VI or impact aid reporting requirements, it's fantastic. And it takes quite a long time, but we got it done, we got it submitted, and we're moving forward. And then one of the big things we do this time of year, which ties into staffing, is review staff licensing, where they are currently, what additional licenses they have. Are you on a license with stipulations? Why aren't you licensed? All of those questions are getting asked, and those who don't have good answers are getting those answers, and those who have those good answers, we are happy to have those good answers for. But because we could potentially lose funding if we don't have qualified staff in front of students. So that is the short version.
Thank you. Question, Dean?
Was there a use found for the old bleachers? I know there were some people interested in that.
I put them in contact directly with the company. I had not heard anything back from Balin at this point. I sent them right to the company direct, so.
I just wanted you to touch base on the WREA Foundation.
Oh,
please.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
So the WRE Foundation has issued an award to one of our people who, every time she's in front of us, is something good. Janine Pfeiffer has, I forget the actual title of the award.
It's the Wisconsin Retired Education, and it's the 2024 Challenge Award.
For her work with the WINGS program. And anybody who talks with Janine for more than 5 seconds can say if there's any award she deserves, she should get it.
She's awesome.
Congratulations.
So,
yeah. Thank you for that.
Great.
That's it.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session on Wisconsin statutes 19851C, 19851F, 19851C and F, 19.851E.
Second.
Second, all in favor, say aye.
Just before I get there, sorry.